Welcome, everyone. It's September 3rd, 2024. This is a work session of Billings City Council. Our work sessions, there's a copy of the agenda on the back. Our procedures are a little more informal than our regular business meetings. We don't make formal binding decisions except for perhaps have a vote to give direction to staff. The purpose is to have a little more open dialogue about things that are important to our city. Three things on our agenda. After each one, there'll be, or in the middle of each one, there'll be an opportunity for public comment. We'll have an opportunity for public comment also at the very beginning and also at the very end of the meeting. But before we get into that, we have a special guest, I'll call him. Wyeth Friday, welcome back. I also want to make a recognition on the front page of Adult Resource Alliance Prime Connections is no one else other than our own Mike and Diane Boyette, who are the recipients. This year they'll be receiving the 2024 Adult Resource Alliance Volunteer Advocate Award at Rocking Under the Big Sky on September 12th, 2024 at Zoo, Montana. That award is intended to honor those who freely give all of their time and talent as volunteers to improve the lives of seniors in Yellowstone County. Congratulations, Mike and Diane Boyette. Thank you very much. Our community appreciates that. So before we jump into our regular agenda, Chris, I think you've got also some presentation at the very beginning. So go ahead.
Yes, Mayor and Council. Jennifer Duray is here with Public Works to walk through a number of efforts that have been going on relative to utility bills. I know all of your and our phone has been ringing as we've been working through these challenges. So Jennifer's got some information she's going to walk through that I believe will help both those who are watching as well as those of us here to help answer questions as we continue to get them. So,
Jennifer, welcome. It's all yours.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So last time I reported on the bills, I told everybody that we were going to be doing 60-day bills. And in case you haven't heard, we did some. So I'm sure your phones have been ringing, our phones have been ringing off the hook too. It was a little bit delayed from the timeline I gave you last time, and what delayed it was a week-long really argument with our vendor who was not prorating the tiers the way we needed them to. So we put that off because we needed to make sure that people were not going to be billed more for a 60-day bill than they would have been for two 30-day bills. So we finally got that. They had to make some development changes and got about 21,000 bills sent out last week. The remainder, so we're not even done yet, and we have a lot of phone calls already, but the remainder were set to go out by the end of the week. It might be delayed until next week. We're not sure. It'll be either Friday or next week. And then we still do have the about 1,000 bills that have never been billed out of this system yet that we still have to get out. We're going to be sending letters with all those bills, and they will end up being 90-day bills for those customers. So the biggest thing I wanted to talk about though tonight was, I'm sure you're all hearing concerns about the bills are incorrect. And we have not found that they are. We've checked thousands so far. So what I have here is an example of someone that had called. Actually, it was on Facebook, and we direct messaged this one. Said, this bill is 4 times the amount of my regular bill. Very common complaint is how it starts. 3 times, 4 times my regular bill. What some people are doing is looking at the total amount instead of looking to see what the current charges are. So this one has a previous balance. So the bill for the June and July fees there are circled in red, and they total $205.30. So then I looked back at last year's at the same time for June and July, and those two bills total $171.57. So not 4 times the amount. This is flow from the plant. So what we're seeing in consumption this year is about a 29% increase compared to last year's flow at the same time. And that's just because of the hotter weather. And I think I've talked during rate studies before about we do the best we can with forecasting, but our revenues can fluctuate by the millions depending on weather only for water. And that's what we're seeing this year is just a hotter summer for people. So on the bill that was back here, and I do have the usage circled. Some people are having trouble finding that, so if you get those calls, the usage is at the top there. 12 kgal, so that's 12,000 gallons. So looking at this person's history for that address, it is more than last year. Last year was 7,000 gallons, the year before was 7,000 gallons. But if you look back further, it's not unusual for this property to be at 12,000 gallons. It's right in there and just indicative of a hotter summer that we've had this year. So we've had rate changes to complicate this a little bit. So we had rate changes go into effect July 1st, and those were water of 9.9%, wastewater 6.2%, solid waste of 4.3%. And then, as you know, we transitioned the storm fee from the property tax bill to a utility bill. So not a new charge, but it is a new fee to the utility bill. And if you add that in, the overall increase that was effective July 1st was 15.5%. So then you compare the billed amount from last year at the same time to this year, and it's a 19.7% increase, or $33. And then that's a little bit higher than maybe what you'd expect, except for the consumption is where the issue is. So it's actually billing for another 5,000 gallons this year. So this is an example of what we get out of the system. It's hard to see, it's hard to read. This is supposed to tell us how all the calculations that go into the bill are done. My brain doesn't work the way the programmer who did this worked, so I have been doing spreadsheets to work out the calculations for people, and because they're sure that some of the calculations are wrong too. So this here is water. You have to go through and you have to know how many days were prior to the rate change, how many days were after, and prorate that rate out. So in this case, everything's only in tier 1 because it's 12,000 gallons, and we increased that tier 1 to 20,000 gallons for these bills. And the overall then blended rate for that is $4.60 per gallon. A lot of people, when they try to calculate this themselves, are leaving out that base fee, the fixed monthly charge part, and they're coming up with a different number. And a lot of people are doing that because they don't realize that there's two parts to the water bill. So if you look at my numbers compared to the bill, it's a penny off just due to rounding, but it comes out perfect as far as the calculations. Do the same thing with sewer, and it comes out to the $70.97 after prorating the two rates. And it's just what we have on the bill. Garbage, it all depends on the service period. For this one, it was 2.4 months of service is what it was billed for. And it has the garbage service dates at the top there. So that charge came out to be $45.87. That includes the black barrel for this address and an extra container there too. And then the storm is the easiest one and the one we've had the fewest questions about, actually. So not all of them are that simple. Some people call in with actual real consumption issues. But we can dig deeper. It doesn't mean that our consumption is wrong on the bill. It's what they used. That system has not changed at all. It's the same meters. It's the same meter system that we've always had. And it's just pulling from that system. But we can dig deeper for people. And this is an example of somebody that called in. And July was extremely high compared to normal usage. This is actually a daycare. They do have some grassy area that they irrigate. So then we can dig in deeper to find out what they're doing on these days. So this is a day-by-day comparison, and you can really see on these where people are irrigating. They're starting at about 6:30 in the morning and finishing at about 10 every day. And then they're starting again at 8 at night and going until about 1 in the morning. So this person was not aware that it was twice a day watering and is going to check into that. So the summary of what we found is we've checked about 4,000 bills is our estimate so far, manually checked them, and we have not found any inaccuracies, anything in consumption, anything in the calculations. We've received thousands of calls, direct messages on Facebook, emails, and really staff is there still tonight, returning voicemails. So we found that the bills are accurate, and I know the rumor is out there that they're not, but these bills, everything that we've seen so far are accurate. The meters are accurate. No changes, like I said earlier, were made. The water usage is recorded accurately, but a lot of people are using more water this year than they were last year at the same time. I was actually going to use Chris's house for an example of this, but he somehow figured out how to use less water this year, so. Obviously, it's a combined billing period, and a lot of people are taking what they're receiving on this bill, and often it has a previous balance on it. They're taking the total amount and comparing it to their May bill, and that's where a lot of the confusion's coming in. And then, of course, we have the annual rate increases that I went over, 15.5% overall. Not an overall 15.5% increase, but just because storm was moved from the property taxes to the utility bill, it looks that way. So we previously had put messages on the bills explaining things. We have FAQs on our website, a utility payment page that's dedicated to it. Social media has been the big one, press release, 3 Q2 interviews so far, and then done lots of direct responses to email, phone, and Facebook direct messages. Today, we sent out a press release. We did a Gazette notice. I think it won't go in until Thursday to notify people, look, these bills are correct. This is kind of how you can look at your bill and figure that out. And then we did an automated phone message directing people to our website. We, of course, updated the website first. We updated our social media with what we found and the accuracy that we're finding with these bills. And of course, we're still responding to email, phone, and direct messages. I have the last one asterisk because as of the time I left there tonight, the email had not gone out. It was still in the process, so I'm not sure if that email to all customers that we have on file for emails will either go out later tonight or tomorrow morning. But we will be sending a message through email too, because we're trying to get the message out that, hey, these bills are not wrong. I know they're higher than what you used to see, but these are accurate bills because we cannot sustain the level of phone calls that we're getting right now for long. So what questions do you have and what can we get into your hands to help you with the messaging?
Thank you, Jennifer. I'll answer that, at least for myself. Could you send us a copy of this PowerPoint? So then we have something to email and also reference ourselves and look back. Some of the printing is a little small, so that'll be helpful for us. And maybe, since this will be on Community 7 TV, maybe you could create a little video clip of this conversation that you could also send us that we could forward on to council or to constituents that might contact us. That would be my suggestions. Council, what other questions do you have for Jennifer? Councilmember Rowan, Councilmember Denise?
Can you, Jennifer, go through again, late fees and all that kind of stuff, just for the public information?
Sure. We're not charging late fees. We're not shutting off water.
For how long are you not charging late fees?
In a previous press release, we said that we would give people 60 days notice. So we will notify people when 60 days time, but we haven't even set up the collections process in the new system, it's going to be a while. And that's typical actually with any new system, that you don't do the collection process right away. You get everything else working first. So we were not planning on charging late fees all summer anyways. It will go a little bit longer because of the delayed process that we've had. I would guess it's 3 months out still before we start doing that.
And then I'm just looking, you guys did a new social media post today, so there's just a couple questions that I thought I'd bounce off you while I've got you here. When will people see their next bills come out?
So the next bill should be back on track with 30-day bills.
Okay.
So that means that next week, by the end of the week, we should be getting out another bill cycle.
Okay, and then what about the frustration people are having because they can't do this themselves? People are saying they can't access old invoices because we've transitioned systems, so they can't actually do their own comparison.
Yeah, what we said in our communications that went out today was to compare what you paid us to last time, because I know that is a frustration, is that you can't pull up your old invoices because they're not in the new portal yet. Or actually, they will not be in the new portal. Only what's billed in that portal will be there. So anybody that keeps paper copies, they have those, but that's few and far between now. So most people don't have those. So we're saying, look back to what you actually paid us during July and August of last year.
But that doesn't give them consumption.
Correct.
So how can they get that information?
The only way is we've been sending it person by person.
Yikes. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, that kind of goes to my question, because I was going to ask if there's a way you could put something online where they can self-calculate, but if they can't get access to the information, then they're not able to get it. So is there anything you can do to make that more automated to them, to just go to the website and say, I'd like to have my, statements from last year or whatever, emails, so it's not taking up staff time, it can be through the process, and then they can go and maybe then self-calculate, if you can have a self-calculation option for them in some way.
Yes, and we've been telling people, anybody that does request their old bills to email utilities@billingsmt.gov, and we will maybe get that out there a little bit more tomorrow too. Trying to keep people away from calling and just emailing, because the voicemail system actually fills up after 100 voicemails, and then people can't leave a voicemail. So we are trying to direct everything through email, but we'll get that out there a little bit better tomorrow too.
Okay, can you send that self-calculator to us as well?
The spreadsheet?
The spreadsheet where you put in the calculations in Excel or whatever.
Sure.
Usable, okay, thank you. And then the last question I had is, and I don't remember when, but I thought last year, didn't the city ask people not to water their lawns for a period of time? And do you know what time of month that was?
It was not last year. It's been a couple years now.
A couple of years,
Yeah.
okay. For some reason, I thought there was the last year, summer of some sort. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to ask, what can we do for people who are in real hardship in terms of paying off their bill? Thank you.
So it's really kind of the same situation we've always had. We don't have any kind of help for utility bills. We've talked about it before, as how you could fund something where we had some kind of utility bill relief, but it never has come to fruition. So for what we're telling people is, try to just pay a third of your bill over the next 3 months to not get too far behind. And then we will be, before we ever do the late fees, we're of course going to let people know that we're going to be doing that with the notice. But anybody who is behind will be personally calling to try to get them on a payment plan.
Thank you.
Very good. Anything else for Jennifer? Don't see anything. So Jennifer, thank you, and thank you for answering those 4,000 inquiries. All right, we'll move on then to public comment on any item. We will have a public opportunity for public comment on our 3 items on our agenda later, but if you need to leave, feel free to make a comment on anything not on our agenda or that is on our agenda. But again, if you can wait, it'll probably make more sense later. So, Mr. Nelson.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. This is on the Sportsplex. So originally, way back, 6-7 years ago, it was proposed a $25 million bond, and that was in 6-year dollars, plus a $3 million soft cost. So tonight they're talking, I think, 22 certainly could raise that up. I think the steering committee had a minimum of 6 courts, and it may have even been an 8-court facility back in the steering committee process, because they felt that was the correct number that would be adequate. Forego soccer for now. You can always build a soccer field, but take the money and put it into the facility for now, and let's get the best facility we can. So I would think you could easily bond $30 to $35 million for a really nice court facility. Especially with, you've got all the motels, all the food, the access, the parking, everything is in place, this, literally the size of Billings. I mean, what people expect to see when they come to town, they're gonna expect a pretty nice facility, and a larger facility is gonna be able to attract those larger events. And especially then when you've got the motels and all the food in place already to accommodate those larger events, I don't see any reason why not taking advantage of this. And the reason I'm leaving is granddaughter's got a flag football game tonight. But where? In Lockwood. So have you ever been to the Lockwood facility out there? I bet there were some people said, geez, I bet we can build a damn sure cheaper football field and a cheaper stand and a cheaper this, but they didn't. They built a really nice facility out there. I mean, this thing is really nice, and you just take a look at what probably some dissenters thought, hey, let's throw a little grass seed and a lawn sprinkler, we can get by with that, but they didn't. And I think it shows, and I think everyone out there is now pretty proud of what they actually did out there with that football in that facility, and that's where I'm going to the game. And I think you should keep that in mind when you think about, golly, let's cut some corners, but maybe it's not time to cut corners. Maybe it's time to, let's get the best we can build and build it now, and no one's ever gonna ever regret that decision. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other public comment on anything not on our agenda, or if you have got to go, one of the other items? No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Move into our regular agenda. The first item up is updating our resolution setting tax rebate policies. Chris, I think you can introduce this and turn over to Diane.
Happy to, Mayor and Council. And we do have Diane here from Big Sky Economic Development, who can answer some questions for us. She has been working with the county and the city for many months. Actually, I think the county took care of this several months back. As the memo and the information we gave you outlined, what we have before you tonight consolidates into one resolution what we had prior in a couple of resolutions. It's consistent with what Yellowstone County has adopted. Though that's not a mandate of the state of Montana, it is a highly, highly strong recommendation, if not plea and request, that we don't approve abatements different between the city and county. I think that wouldn't help us at all. So that's what we have before you tonight is resolutions updating our tax abatement program, making it consistent with what Yellowstone County has adopted and consistent with statute. And I'd give the podium to Diane if anything she would like to add.
Yeah, thank you very much. We really took a group or collaborative approach on this between the city and the county staff, and tried to work together to listen to what council had told us that they would like to see, listen to what county commissioners said they would like to see, to pull together one document that is easier for the applicants to follow. It's more clear and concise for council and commissioners to review and go through. We did raise the limit on all of those. The minimum limit or minimum investment to be considered for a tax abatement is now $500,000 across all programs. In the old 10-year program, there was for new businesses, I believe it was $50,000, and for expanding businesses, it was $125,000. So those thresholds are now at $500,000. So across the board, it just makes it much easier for those applicants and for determining values and looking at across the board. The other thing that has changed is that we're asking for more detailed information from the applicants on job creation
numbers, job retention numbers, and then their payroll and their investment in that payroll in our community. So those are really the only changes that have been made, except for to take all of those separate resolutions, combine them into one. This was, or became an opportunity in Montana in 1988. And since that time, we really haven't looked at those resolutions. So over 15, coming up on 20 years for most of these resolutions, it was a great time to really look at them, see how we could streamline the process and make it a little bit easier and more concise for everyone. If you have any questions, I'm happy to go through those.
Questions for Diane. Councilmember Neese?
Yeah, Diane, the job creation, I noticed in there it said that they have an annual reporting requirement. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay, so let's say they're going to produce, 50 extra jobs a year, right? And so we approve it based upon that, but they do their annual report and they say they only got 20 or 30, or so it's less than the 50 they said. So does anything happen with that information? Does their tax abatement get shrunk? What's the reason for the annual report to keep coming in if we're already approved it and then they're getting their abatement?
The annual reports are at the request of both council and commission to get a screenshot essentially of the abatement, what the abatement is doing for new job creation and retention within our community. So it's helping to give you that screenshot. At this time, we don't have any, or to my knowledge, and I will refer that to staff, legal, but we have never, to my knowledge, pulled an abatement because of not meeting numbers.
So just a quick follow-up, Mayor, on
Sure.
the answer. You said that it was requested by council, but this is the first time we're hearing it. And so I'm not quite sure I understand when you say that was requested by council. Maybe commissioners.
Before my time, back when these resolutions were created. So I can't tell you how this came to be. I just know from the time that I've taken over working on this program, we provide an annual report showing the job creation, payroll, what those investments are, and the impact that has on our city and county.
Okay. So, but there's no action, so we're making them put these reports really for reporting information. It doesn't really impact their award whatsoever.
Not to my knowledge at this time.
Okay. Mayor,
We
do you
haven't
mind?
had anyone that has that hasn't had either retained jobs or had an increase in the number of jobs that they said they were going to. It may not be the full number, but they did show some job creation.
Okay, Mayor, mind if I redirect to the city attorney to find out if that's even possible?
Sure.
Okay, Gina, do you know if that's even a possibility that something like this could happen if they're claiming they're going to put in, X number of jobs, but they don't produce the number of jobs, and it's really not helping the local economy like it's intended to? Is that something that could even be written into an agreement where their abatement would be reduced at percentage based upon the number of jobs they're creating?
Councilmember Bernice, I know that there are some provisions in these statutes that allow for that, but I'm not sure if that one is. So I'll look while you're continuing to have a discussion and see if
Okay,
that's
thank
something
you.
we could do.
Thank you. Other questions for Diane? Councilmember Rowan?
Actually, no, Mayor, my question was for Gina, not Diane.
Oh,
Did you
go
want me to
ahead.
wait? Okay.
No.
So, did I cut you off?
No, I actually had more for Diana, but,
Oh, okay. Can we
Yeah,
finish
I can wait.
Councilmember Neese? Go ahead.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. Diana, one more question as I read through there. You'd mentioned you changed the investment up from $50,000 to $500,000. How did they come up with that $500,000 investment amount?
So on the 5-year tax abatement program, the minimum investment is 500,000. And so conferring with everyone, it seemed to make sense to raise that to 500,000 across each of the programs to make it more consistent. The state minimum threshold of investment still remains the same. Again, they have not looked at those statutes or changed those thresholds since they were created.
Okay, I'm sorry, but again, this is the first time we're seeing that, so it hasn't been discussed with us of how this 500,000, so you said it was discussed with everyone. Who is this everyone that was, that?
Sorry, so when the last tax abatements had come before council and the commissioners, there was an ask to look at those statutes or the resolutions and how we address those. So city and county legal and finance, along with commissioner and city administrator and myself, we sat down and looked at each of those resolutions to see how we could best pull together one resolution that encompasses all of the statutes that pertain to tax abatement, and then find a threshold that was more in line with 2024 versus 1988.
Okay, and so was there a discussion of what that basis was on? Chris, were you there?
So, yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Neese, are you referring to how did we get from 50,000 to 500,000 and use a consistent 500? I mean, I don't want to say there's, it's magic. As Diane said, 500,000 was already a part of the statute relative to one of the three. We thankfully don't see applications for what the statute allowed. I mean, there were, at a $50,000 threshold, we could have so many of these on a night, but frankly, it wasn't. I don't think that's because the business community just didn't know about them. They weren't worth all the time and effort to try to get that tax relief. So we tried to find a point at which it seemed to make common sense, where someone who's making the investment would find it worth their effort for Big Sky Economic Development staff to work through and take city and county time for authorization or approval by you. That's how, I mean, and landed at 500,000 seeming like a good floor for those investments to be worth the abatement process. Am I missing your question, or?
Well, and so this was discussed when? This was,
So
because the county
after
commissioners approved it, what, in May? Did I
So
read that right?
last year, I wanted, time flies, I think it was in 2023, we had a retailer in here of which we gave an abatement for. And just candidly, and I won't name it, but that retailer was eligible, met the eligibility. But there was a lot of feedback that what in the world are we doing an abatement on a retail operation, da-da-da. So that frankly kicked us forward to say each time we bring an abatement, there's kind of some questions. So let's update this, let's get them consistent, and let's present something to the council. So we're here at a work session. Yes, the county has already adopted theirs. In a perfect world, we both would have seen them. It didn't get on your agenda. But we as a staff worked with Big Sky Economic Development to get this to the point for county and city approval.
So other than last year during that tax abatement, that's really the only council input that?
Well, we had the Coca-Cola abatement. We've had a few abatements over the years. We don't see a lot of them, but each of the abatements have come with kind of different questions.
Okay, and I do have one more question regarding the 500,000, if you don't mind, Mayor.
Okay.
So one of the things we see a lot, not always, again, we don't see a lot of these abatements, but we see a lot of other TIF funding coming in, or maybe some revolving lines with some type of tax dollars coming into these projects. So when you say $500,000 investment, are you talking about the actual owner private investment? Are we talking about investment including additional tax dollars that may be coming into this project that is coming to us?
So that's a great question. It is private investment in the project at that minimum of 500,000. I've also been working with Wyeth over this past year, looking at TIF dollars and, development contracts and how that works. And The way it's set up with the city is it's a one or the other. If you're receiving tax increment financing, then you wouldn't be eligible for tax abatement or vice versa. So it's whichever one the property owner or business owner feels they want to move forward with. We haven't done one to date that it's not that it's not legally not allowed, but it's been an agreement between the city and the county using those development agreements that it would either be one or the other.
Would that be so difficult to add to this resolution to indicate that it has to be private investment? So that whether it's federal tax dollars or state or local tax dollars, that they can't count that as toward the 500,000? And would that mess up with what the county's already approved?
That's a good question as well. I believe because of the way it's set up in the TIF agreements with property owners that we cover that issue, but we could certainly look at that. I would ask.
Guys, I'm just,
Our staff,
TIF is only one, I'm concerned about any other additional tax dollars.
That's the only one that I can think of that is local public dollars that would be aligned with the programs.
Okay, why don't we move on? If it's covered in your TIF policy, maybe we don't have to, but add it to the list of future changes, or if other changes have to be made with the county anyway, maybe that could be worked into it. Councilmember Rowan?
Thanks, Mayor. Hey, Gina, I admit that I struggle a little bit with exactly understanding what, as a charter form of government, we can exempt ourselves from under state law. So I'm curious how much autonomy we might have to create our own TIF policy that is less, or I'm sorry, tax abatement policy that is less controlled by state statute. Could we, for example, identify other priority industries rather than those that are listed here? How much creativity and space do we have?
Yeah, Councilmember Owen, I would really like to dive into that deeper than to try to give you an answer to that right now. I think that there is probably some ability to do that. But I'd really like to look at the corresponding statutes about what limits and grants of authority that we have so that I can advise you more thoroughly and properly.
Would you mind digging into a additional hypothetical? If hypothetically speaking, we wanted to offer prospective or pre-approved tax abatement, would we have the authority to do that? So in a hypothetical scenario where there were a designated corridor and there was a master plan for that corridor, could we say that builders who build to that spec, achieve X number of jobs, invest X amount of dollars, will be, have a administrative only process or an expedited process or a certain, can we de-risk the possibility of getting abatement under a certain set of circumstances? Do we have the authority as a charter form of government to do that? If you wouldn't mind. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I guess this is not really a question, it's more of a comment. And I do remember the last application, and it was part of my comment about our application process and approval that that it was unclear whether or not job creation, how important it was for this particular abatement. So I'm sort of reading through the whereases, and I don't see it really focused. It talks about construction and remodeling and modernizing. I do read in the attachment, the exhibit, more about job creation. So this is just a question. I mean, do you think the whereases really should emphasize that quality job creation more than it does in this draft? Or would that make a difference? I mean, does it make a difference if the county has already approved this particular resolution? But I don't see in the whereas a really strong statement about job creation and quality job creation.
So I would say that job retention is as important as job creation. And with each application, council and commission have a chance to review what they're proposing, what they do for retaining employees, and then what those wages are for new employees. And that gives council, a chance to decide whether that meets that threshold that they would choose to. By not having that in the actual language of the resolution, it doesn't have to be changed every time we have minimum wage increases or we have a big cost of living, any of those spikes. It gives council a chance to look at what those factors are on the day that a tax abatement is coming before you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for Diane? Diane, I'll just make two quick comments. One, in the definition of new. New means the firm is new to the city of Billings. That seems simple enough. I just am wondering whether it's always going to be clear what new to the city of Billings means. Say an organization that has done business here but has no physical plant. Are they new to Billings? I don't know. I don't want to mess up what the county has already done, but if you're keeping a list of things we might want to clarify, especially if that creates actual problems, for sure. And then in the effort to be very specific about the number of jobs and all of that, they have to provide these notarized lists of both in the application process and then later in the review process. And I'll just point out that under Montana law, there's two types of notarization. One just says that's the person in front of me who's signing this document. They may be full of mistruths and false statements, but we know who's signing it, and that's just an acknowledgement. But I doubt that's what you really mean. I think what you probably mean by notarized is what we call a jurat, which is a sworn statement. I actually am swearing that we added this many jobs. So again, just how you interpret this in your application, I don't think it necessarily has to be changed, but if you're keeping a list for future improvements, you could be more specific in saying it's a sworn notarized statement, something like that.
So on the definitions that you mentioned, those are taken directly from state statute. So I haven't, or we collectively in the review committee have not added additional opinion to what the state was meaning when they listed that in their definition. So we can definitely look at that. I typically ask city and county attorneys to review the application to determine if they meet the criteria before we bring that application forward to council. Notary was a term to put some more teeth into the reporting, but not to make it onerous for council, commission, city, county staff, and Big Sky Economic Development, but to have something that is more accurate or more saying that you've reviewed these documents. We're asking for a little bit more information than what we have in the past with the old resolutions. So just asking for more data and a little bit more clarity so that we can report better to the jurisdictions on what the actual impacts and outcomes of the program are.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else for Diane before we open it up for public comment? Okay, thank you, Diane. We do want to leave an opportunity for public comment. If anybody here would like to comment on item number 1, please come forward at this time. Any public comment on item number 1? Doesn't look like it, so we'll close our public comment period. Council, I think it's my assumption that this will end up on a future agenda for approval, probably on the consent agenda, unless we indicate otherwise. So I don't know that we need a formal vote on that if there's no disagreement, but I just want to be clear about it. Councilmember Denise?
It sounds to me like we can't really make any changes unless the county's going to make any changes. So I think the last time this was reviewed, Chris, it was what, 1988? Is that what you said before? I
would say at the time each resolution was adopted. I don't recall the year that each resolution, the council has 3 resolutions on the books.
2005. So it'll be years before we review this again. So all these suggestions today will be lost unless something is done, unless we take action now to say, listen, we'd like to have some of these changes and clarified, and then have that taken to the county to see if they won't mind changing their resolutions, which should be an easy change for them to do anyway. So I would suggest maybe having that conversation with the county, with some of the conversations we had tonight with them, and then see if they agree with some of those suggestions.
Just sort of informal conversation with staff, you're saying?
Since they've done that now, so that's.
What does the rest of the council think? How do we proceed?
Is this the clarity you were looking for?
No, I don't think it's clarity you were looking for or I was looking for, so.
Okay, I didn't hear any changes, but
To make it clear, I would make make the motion to make a direction as staff to take that conversation tonight to the county, to discuss it with them, to see if they agree with any of these suggestions that have been talked about tonight, to make sure that resolution is a little more clear in what how these monies are going to be spent, or the definitions you talked about, things like that.
can we be more specific about exactly what those changes would be?
Well, it's specifically, I think, to make sure that it's indicated it's private dollars, so that there is no tax dollars being used in any form or another, just not TIFs. And whether or not they agree if there should be some type of future penalty for if they don't meet those job creation numbers. I mean, a lot of times this is based upon what they're doing. And if there's anything, they may not, and I'm not so sure I agree with even having that, but I'm wondering why we even have making them jump through these hoops if we're not going to have something on there. And then your suggestions about something, you're right. As I read through this, I was also looking at some of those definitions, wondering, really, what is new? I mean, I think the definitions weren't clear enough to me as I read through some of it. So those are the three things that stick out. But mainly the tax dollar investment. And I guess the other question, maybe I should have asked this earlier, is if their project comes to Bethesda that says, it's a $300,000 project, is that going to be, there's no way that can be made an exception to? Or is it, the 500,000 is a hard number? Because, I mean, that's a pretty good jump from $50,000 to $500,000 on some of the abatements. And what I'm thinking of is areas like Grand Avenue, who we aren't going to do a TIF district on, but a lot of those areas that maybe could be revitalized, you were talking a lot of investment now, which is well over some of that. I'm just concerned about how this could limit some of the areas that maybe could do some revitalization with some tax abatement.
Okay, specifying that there must be private dollars penalty if they don't meet the job creation goals, clarifying the definition of new to Billings, and lower threshold than $500,000 in some areas that are especially important for redevelopment. That's what I heard. The council, how important is it to incorporate those possible changes? Do you want to kick this back to the county? Councilmember Shaw.
I guess I feel like I don't see there being a lot of harm in having a conversation with the county, but I'm not personally interested in adopting a resolution that's different than what the county has adopted. That I think whatever happens, we need to stay in line with them. And I mean, it does seem like a big jump, but it's been like 40 years. So it makes sense to me. So that would be my feedback, is that I'm fine if staff wants to go forward and have that conversation with the county and then just bring it back on a consent agenda and saying, yes, they like this, no, they don't like this, they're not going to adopt any of these things, and then that's the end of the conversation for me. Then we adopt it as it is.
Okay, Councilmember Joy, and at some point we'll need probably some sort of a motion and vote.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I guess it's sort of, a couple of those really depend, and what Councilmember Owen mentioned really wasn't incorporated into your list in terms of what you ask for from the county attorney to look into. So I'm not sure, I mean, if the real point of this is to spur job retention and creation, I'm thinking of some different opportunities for redevelopment, and I think I don't want to stated, but I believe that, in the presentation, we were told that not very many small businesses apply to this. So I'm not sure that having a lower threshold would really change that. A lot of small businesses, if they can expand and hire additional people, a lot of times it's only part-time. So I'm not sure that they would be really what this resolution and the tax abatement is geared for. So that would be my concern, and that lowering the threshold really wouldn't get any better applications or more applications, and meeting that requirement for employment might be really difficult for a small business. Thank you.
Okay. Just keep things moving because our next item is up. I don't like to do this, but actually make motions because I don't want to look like I'm controlling this too much. But I'm going to make the motion to just move this ahead to the on a future consent agenda as is. But ask staff to talk to the county about this, add it to the list for future changes. I think the best approach here is to just not wait 25 years until we come back and fine tune this, get it on a list, come back in a year or two. We can make any additional changes, but just move this ahead as is. That would be my motion. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Boyette. And discussion now on that motion. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you. I agree with Councilmember Shaw that let's move along with this, but let's visit with the county on those items. If they can make some substantive changes between now and when it shows up again, great. If not, at least we've done something after 1988.
Okay, further discussion on the motion. Councilmember Neese.
So are you suggesting that the conversation with the county happens before it comes back to the agenda? Or you're saying bring this back to the agenda, have a conversation later, and then the staff report back to us?
No, I think that's a good point. I think a conversation with the county should happen before it comes back on the agenda. So if the county says, yeah, we really better make those changes, we can then go back to the drawing board. But the default is this moves ahead as is.
Okay, thank you. That's actually, again, that's kind of what I was asking for. I'll support that motion. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, if in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, nay. Okay, that resolves item number 1 and brings us to item number 2. Our South Billings Urban Renewal Association and Amen Park Sports Complex. Chris, I think you probably know who our presenters are, so I'll let you introduce them.
Dick is going to kick things off here from South Billings Urban Renewal District.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff, my suburban board that's here, and special guests. I am Dick Sear. I reside at 3039 Golden Acres Drive, and I'm the consultant to the South Billings Urban Renewal Association. I appreciate you guys taking the time tonight to listen to this proposal. We have spent hours, years working on this, trying to meet all the suggestions we've had, such as public-private partnership, ability to be able to use a facility like this, and, safety concerns. I would like to say that we have a golden opportunity here right now to do something special for not only the South Billings Urban Renewal District, but the city of Billings, the Yellowstone County, and also the region. So tonight, I'll go through some key points of what we're trying to do. I have some renderings of some things that we're doing on the south side right now, some that we're going to be doing. But our request tonight for the city council is that we'd like to have you direct the Mike Pigg and his staff in conjunction with the suburb board to develop a request for proposal to select a design team for the Amen Recreation Campus, call it the ARC, to include the following. We'd like to have 4 indoor courts that will convert to 8 courts for younger participants. Installation of a second turf soccer field adjacent to the existing one, be just to the east of the one that's there right now. We have light poles up there that all we'd have to do is have a light headed to the east, would have it all set up that way. A site development and installation of the infrastructure for the Amen Recreation Complex campus, and also create a pad site for hockey, and I'll cover that a little bit later, Signal Peak Mines nonprofit, and create 2 other pad sites for future development, whether it be tennis, swimming, pickleball, or whatever. Next one. This one. These are just some projects that we completed on the south side here recently. Taco John's. The middle one is the TPA group. Oops. Let me use this one here. That one is the TPA group. It's the big warehouses south of the interstate off of the frontage road. That project alone will probably increase the taxes in our district by about $400,000. This is called Mobile Star. They sell containers, for, projects, road projects especially, different things like that. And they are now completed. We've also done a safe drop-off spot on Orchard School. We've helped with the softball field at Riverside. Projects underway right now. The Billings Hotel and Convention Center is adding a big convention area for the city of Billings. The project on the right, there'll be a TIF request tomorrow night. That's the Trails Head Inn, the former Holiday Inn. You see the lower part of that facility there. They're going to tear down 217 rooms and just leave the high rise up there. And so they've got a request in that we'll be meeting on tomorrow night. These projects, I really believe, a lot of it has to do with the anticipation of having a recreation complex, sports complex on that south side. And they, we've talked about it for years, and it may not be the only thing that decided that, but I can guarantee it had a big impact to it. Why would a motel, just do it because of, we hadn't had one for a long time. When we started talking about this complex, now we've got 2 or 3 new ones in there. We've got expansion of the Billings Hotel. All those types of things I believe really had, this discussion on this complex had an impact on getting that new business there. This is the pad site that I was talking about, the Amen Recreation Complex. The soccer field would go right there. The courts would go there. This pad site is where the hockey would go. This pad site is future development, maybe a swimming pool. This one up here is tennis courts, pickleball, and that type of thing. What we've done here, our goal has always been not to spend all the money that we have on a recreation complex so that we have money left over for other projects like, when there's still streets to do down there. We've paved a lot of streets. I met with Tyler last week. There's still about 10 more streets to go, and we plan on continuing to work with getting those streets paved, curbs, gutters, sidewalks, and that type of thing down on the south side. We've done a lot. But the rec center, we're looking at about $21 million. The turf field is about $1.8 million. And there's discussion about the south side pool, and we've got about $7.2 million in there. The discussion, there's something the council will have to decide what way they would like to go with that pool. And we have said that we will support whatever you guys decide, and we do have money available for that. Now, I know that one of the concerns was that 7.2 won't do that south side pool, but we'll have a couple other tax payments come in between now and then. We also have $3 million here, and we're going to, if you guys give us the permission to go forward with this project, we'll have somebody, Melanie Swartz is here tonight, and she will be under contract to start raising money for this project. And we hope that between naming rights and different things like that, we can get another $4 to $5 million. But it's very important that this project does not eat up all the money that we have for the south side, and that we can still be able to do the projects and handle the requests we got. So we kept that in mind. There's a lot of community benefit that I've stated before, places for people to go. I know that when people people interviewed, like doctors, that they look at what amenities a city has before that doctor comes to town. And if we can provide a facility like that, that gives them a lot of things to do, this will help with after-school programs. All the schools in that area have said that they would utilize this facility. It offers recreation for all ages, not just kids, but people as old as me can go in there and walk, and they won't call me Joe Biden because I walk so slow, and different things like that. So it's a facility for all ages. And I'll have Evan Decker come up here a little bit later and talk about the economic impact of this project. But it's a major impact. It's anywhere from $12 to $25 million economic impact. And it comes from a lot of different things that we can bring in here. We can bring in travel team tournaments for basketball, volleyball, wrestling. Like I said before, my granddaughter's in cheer competition. They went out to the Metro. They're way too small for the Metro, but this would be a great facility for things like that. Gymnastics. It'll be set up and lined out for volleyball, pickleball, that type of thing, as well as basketball. So anything that can go in a gymnasium and be used for that, we'll be able to host it there. The public-private partnership, I want to elaborate on that. I don't know if we have anybody from, can you tell if we have anybody from Signal Peak Mine zoomed in tonight at all? Is that possible? We do not have anybody. They are actually in Toronto right now looking at ice equipment because they're going to build a facility, and they want to do it here because it makes a lot of sense for them. It's right off the interstate, gives them great access. They have city water and sewer available there. And they have committed $6 million to this project, and they're out raising money for more. And it's kind of there's a big time crunch with them because they've got to have something either under buy-sell or under lease by the end of the year. And then, there's also some commitment from the parent company that says they have certain guidelines. They would lose this money and have to reapply for it if they didn't have those things in place by the end of the year. So this request for proposal is very important. The timing of it is very important to get it out there as quick as we possibly can because they are willing to go ahead and build. Their plan right now is to build one court indoors with a pad for the second court outdoors with the ability to, at a later date, as the funds come in, to go ahead and enclose it. This court, the outdoor court, would have a canopy over the top of it, come down about halfway to protect as much as they possibly can. And then in the off season, they'll be able to use it for other things. They can put baskets in there, just portable baskets, different things like that in summertime. But they are really committed to this project. I would like to talk, just briefly go over the reason why I think that you guys should support this project. Every survey completed since 2010 says Billings has a need for additional recreation facilities. ARC is projected to provide an economic impact of between $12 and $25 million, provide an alternative to gangs and criminal activity. Maybe we can't stop the ones that are doing it now, but maybe we could prevent the younger ones from getting started in that. We have an opportunity for a public-private partnership, which has been important to the council. Project adds 2 pad sites for additional opportunities such as swimming, tennis, pickleball, and so forth. The addition of another turf field for soccer and other field sports. If you go down there, sometime during the summer, and you can see as many as 2,000 kids participating in soccer down there. And with the addition of another one, they can even make that bigger. We do not need a bond issue to raise taxes to pay for this. That's a big key. ARC will not require a mill levy to cover. This project will not require a mill levy to cover operating expenses. That was another big item. It is a multi-generational facility that will provide activities for all ages, including a walking track. This facility will have party, rooms for hosting birthday parties, things like that. It'll have locker rooms and have all the amenities, concessions, and that type of thing. Just the possibility of this project has already created a tremendous amount of economic growth in the Suburban TIP district. And here's a big one, and this is very important to me. No one will be turned away because of their inability to pay. And I've talked to the Signal Peak Mine people, and they are in agreement with that as well. They want to make sure they've got programs already planned for kids that have never skated before, and also to help them get started and that type of thing, and that they are in agreement with that. And then lastly, but not least, is that Saburo will work with the city to solve the Southside Pool challenge. And the one other thing I'd like to mention again is we want to make sure we haven't spent all the money that we want to use on other projects in that South Billings Urban Renewal District. So with that, I'll have open for any questions.
Thank you, Dick. Thank you for working on this very significant project. Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Rowan.
Thanks, Dick. That was very entertaining. I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Let's say you have this basketball court there you can make it into 8. What's the operation and maintenance of this? What's that going to, do you have any idea what that costs annually, and who's going to provide that over the next 20 to 30 years?
Okay, we got Mike here. Would like Mike Pickle to address that, his staff, and Corey Thompson, and then also Evan Decker will cover some of that for you.
You know, raise a question. Do you have anybody else as part of your presentation?
Yeah, I do.
You know, my inclination, rather than break it up, why don't we get all of your presenters, okay, and then we can see who we might have questions for if we can do that.
Let's start with Mike here then, or Corey.
Corey's actually going to present some information for you to let you see a scenario of operational, what we think operation of the hard court facility would be. We're not getting into great detail, but want to at least show you what thoughts gone into how something like this could operate.
All right, thank you, Chris. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I also like to thank Dick Zier and the Sabura Board for their sincere efforts and interest in improving Billings with indoor recreation space. Dick talked quite a bit about this being a venue for tournaments, and we agree. Weekends, basketball, volleyball, wrestling, number of opportunities, but we wanted to focus on the community and what this would provide our community, especially kind of during the week. So we put together a presentation. This first slide here, I realize is kind of hard to read, but this is just a sample of what's possible maybe on a given Tuesday in November or on a Thursday in March, of what our staff with the recreation, we've got 4 recreation specialists, and we are always looking for space to expand and provide new programming. And again, this is just a sample. The rest of the slide I'll kind of go through some of the individual opportunities and expansion we see here. I think it's important to realize currently during the school year, we've got access to middle schools from about 6 to 10 p.m. That's assuming they don't have a concert or games or something else planned for their students. So those are kind of our mini rec centers, but again, we're really limited based first on their schedule, and then second, trying to get kids in there and also adults. So those are our facilities. Something like this would expand those opportunities exponentially. So we'll talk first about seniors. Currently, we utilize our community center downtown. We've also partnered with the Adult Resource Alliance and utilized their facilities because we've expanded kind of beyond what we can have at the community center. You can see the number of participants, seniors exercising, doing wellness programming. Obviously, this facility during the school year would be a tremendous impact for our seniors. We've talked, and Council, you're I think aware of our Rec to You program. We did expand that this summer to 8 locations throughout town for 8 weeks. We had nearly 2,000 kids participate at those sites. And we've talked internally about wouldn't it be nice to have a place to offer a program like this year round. Again, a 4-court facility we think is a tremendous opportunity to provide preschool and homeschool Rec to You programming during the day, and then after school, what a great opportunity for those kids to come, and we'll provide recreation for them after school as well. We talked a lot about expanding new youth sport opportunities. We're pretty much limited to just basketball and volleyball. That's about all the time and space we have, but there are a number of other opportunities to provide additional programming. Also like to mention that we plan to stay in those 6 middle schools for all of our youth sports. We want to be where the kids are. We want to stay in their home schools. So this facility would just allow us to expand to new and different programs and activities. Same with the adults. Again, realize that we provide kids programming. We try to get them in as early as we can. The adults typically come in after the kids get done. Again, volleyball and basketball is about all we can squeeze into the middle schools during the week. So again, this allows us to expand those leagues, programs, and also offer a bunch of new opportunities. One of our big things, and you've heard before, all of our summer camps, we are full. We have capacity in just about every camp we offer. Again, those are Monday through Friday from 7:30 in the morning till 5:30 in the evening. We have waiting lists for those camps. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to have up to 100 kids in a Amon Park Playhouse type program at that facility during the summer months? Also allow us for a sports camp series inside that facility. We currently do some of that outside, but again, having that access to 4 courts, we could provide a multitude of a sports camp series. We got specialty camps and educational camps. And I think the nice thing, again, a conceptual design is it's going to allow for different types of activities to all happen at the same time. It's going to be a large enough space to do that. We've talked, and Dick mentioned a walking track. Obviously, you have open gyms for basketball. Guys, if they want to come and work out before work, they could do that. Noon ball, those types of programs. And we're pretty sure we could get pickleball in there during the winter months. Talked a lot about the opportunities for weekend tournaments, basketball, volleyball, and again, a multitude of different opportunities. Our conceptual plan talks about a sports coordinator. This person would pretty much work the weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and will work directly with Visit Billings and the T-Bid to solicit, secure, and then support those tournaments throughout the year. If there weren't tournaments, there I'm sure would be other opportunities, a venue for different types of maybe festivals, fairs, job fairs, fundraisers for other groups. So again, we think a facility like this would be right-sized to host a lot of different events in that venue. Again, projected operations, all we know right now is it's 4 full-size courts. We're not sure of anything else. It's a piece of paper. So a conceptual design tells us we're going to need some staffing. There'll be a large number of seasonal support staff to help with the operations and the maintenance of that facility and support the folks that are there. Again, we look at the revenue side of things, and it's going to take 2 to 4 years to ramp up to those types of uses we think are possible. We've given some assumptions there, some daily admission fees, some court rental fees. We talked with School District 2, utilizing their current rates for court rentals. Again, we realize tournaments are going to be pretty popular. Concessions are a great thing to have in these types of facilities. We manage the Rose Pool concessions. We bring in around $100,000 a year. We think we can obviously do better than that, but we're not sure how many nachos or taco in a bag we'll sell with Taco Bell very close, or hamburgers or hot dogs with Dairy Queen. So again, projected 2 to 4 years to reach that full revenue potential. It could be 2, could be 3. We think within that time frame we could do that. And so with that, I would entertain any questions you may have, or there may be one more presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. We'll hold off on questions at least until we've heard from everybody. Chris?
Yeah, we have Evan Decker, Sports Tourism Manager from Visit Billings. He's going to cover the next section here.
Thank you,
And
Evan.
then I believe after that, I think we can do Q&A of the group and go from there.
Great. Evan, welcome.
Thank you for having me tonight, everyone. So what I'm passing out right now is some potential sports tourism impact calculations for a facility of this nature. lot of numbers in that piece, and there's not much that I can say further than what Dick has already said, as well as the rest of everyone. But if you turn over to the backhand side of that paper, you'll look at totals and references and conclusions of this study. Basically, where we're at is very similar to where we were with calculations for the original sports complex, generating somewhere in the realm of 25 million for that original facility. That number's dropped a little bit with the subtraction of the pool at the end of the day. We're looking at somewhere at 9.7 to 15.4 million in direct economic impact, which is directly correlated to the hotels, restaurants, things that a visitor would usually spend on. And then further from that, we're looking at total economic impact in the realm of 23.75 to 36.6.
And
Now-
Evan, can you specify the time period you're talking about?
Yes, I can. So that's over a 12-month calendar. So that being said, when you look at, filling out a calendar for a venue of this nature, you can have that slower ramp up. But I'd also like to say, we at Visit Billings are very interested in filling out a venue of this nature immediately. So if we did have groundbreaking dates in mind, that would be something where we would immediately start selling it as a destination for sports organizers. So there might not be that slower ramp up that could happen, but with the addition of somebody that would be a tournament organizer or a tournament manager working with Visit Billings to generate that interest and fill out the calendar prior to opening, you could see numbers, at the year 3 mark that were in the previous slide. And then outside of that, I'd be more than willing to take questions afterward as well.
Very good. Chris, anybody else in the way of presenters?
I don't think we have any other presenters. The other piece I would add, as they mentioned, Signal Peak was a part of the conversation, and Dick commented, City Attorney Dahl and I had a conversation with their legal representative today, just trying to understand better what they're looking at relative to their financial commitment and what is understood to be a pretty tight timeline relative to being able to tap in to the first part of that. So we don't have anything to present to you about that, but I want to let you know we were on the phone today with their legal counsel, and tomorrow I have a meeting. Depending upon where you give us direction tonight, we've got the team ready to start working forward on the request for proposal component to get that rolling ASAP. So I'll turn it over to you, Mayor and Council, and the team here is all to answer questions.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, presenters. Council, let's offer any questions. I would recommend that we try to stick to as factual questions as much as possible because we do want to open up for public comment. And I don't want to prejudge the kind of the merits of this. We'll have an opportunity to talk about that for sure. But before we open up for public comment, do you just have some kind of factual questions for any of the presenters? And of course, you can come back later after public comment if you want to follow up as well. I have a feeling everybody may have something, so why don't we just start down here? If you can, just kind of keep your questions to like 2, and if we get through and you've got more, we may have time after that, but we want to make sure we have an opportunity for everybody to ask questions. So, Councilmember Rupes, do you mind starting us off?
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, Dick, whoever, I just want to make sure I understand the real priorities here, because one of the things that's really driving some amount of urgency is Signal Peak's donations to support the development of specifically the ICE facility. And I don't know that came out a lot in your presentation, but they are talking millions of dollars to help fund the construction of that facility. So it wouldn't take any city dollars to build or operate that facility. However, we have to put things in place so that they can make some of those financial commitments this calendar year. So I want to make sure that I understand what we really need out of tonight. And there are a lot of things that can then be staged after that. But out of tonight, we need to have direction to you guys to go forward with getting an RFP or whatever needs to be done for a site development plan. Call it a site plan, site master plan, something like that. It's not a park master plan, but it's a site layout plan. Or these are the pad sites. This is where Utilities need to be put in place and all those types of things. That is one thing that we need to give you direction on. And the other thing that we need to give you direction on is establishing a lease for the pad site specifically dedicated to the ICE facility. Is there anything else that is of urgent need tonight to get direction, understanding that there's a whole lot of steps here? We don't have to issue bonds tonight. We don't have to, anything. In fact, the court facility itself is not something that has to be done tonight and doesn't even have to be wrapped up in the site development plan. So can you give me some feedback on that so that I can make sure that when it comes time for a motion, we have the right thing identified?
Okay. I probably didn't make it clear enough on that Signal Peak involvement. They have created a nonprofit to actually own and operate this facility. We need, I guess our goal is to create the infrastructure available to all that whole location down there. The quicker we get it for them, the better it is, because they are ready to start today. Obviously, they're in Toronto buying equipment, looking at equipment. So from my perspective, and I think the board's perspective, we would like to go forward with both, with the emphasis on the infrastructure so they get that done as quick as we can. We know it's going to take longer to design the building, but we would like to get both of it done tonight so that we can go ahead and get started on, both of them. And if the design team could and probably will include the engineer for the site development and the infrastructure, so we might as well go for both at the same time. But the priority should be to get the site development so those guys can get started. You're correct.
And so it's not a design of the courts facility. It's not a design of the ICE facility. It's a design for the horizontal kind of work, right? The layout of the pad sites and the infrastructure, some costing for what that infrastructure will take to build.
Well, I guess I anticipate the design team would do both simultaneously with an engineer, and then the architects do more with the building. So I would prefer we do it both and get them started now.
Okay. If I could, then
Go
just a
ahead.
second, yep. The other question I wanted to talk about, and Andy and I talked briefly about this earlier, was the staff memo is pretty clear that if this full bonding that you've proposed here, up to $30 million, is done, then there'll be very little room for larger projects in the future as these bonds are paid off. The financial projections here, though, indicate that, through FY 27, 8, 9, and out, we're accumulating, about $2 million a year, give or take, through those years that could be used for other projects.
Exactly.
Andy, you had some thoughts on this. There's some reason why we can't bond more than that, even though there's more revenues available through the TIF district. But also, we would be limited to doing projects that could be paid for using that $2 million or so of cash per year. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Can you make sure I understand those things correctly, please?
Mayor and Council, Councilor Rupsis, yes, generally your comments are correct. Our limitation to bond is set by actually the bonds we've already issued, which is basically we've made a promise that says we won't issue bonds unless we're bringing in, I think it's 125% or 140% of our annual debt payment in gross revenue. So that's what sets that limit. So until our revenue is up quite a bit to exceed that 140% of annual debt service, we couldn't issue more bonds. These are obviously just projections here. There's some assumption that tax growth occurs in the district. I think historically speaking, that's probably a fair assumption for this district. And then there are no projects planned out there in 28, 29, and that's why it's accumulating cash. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, Councilor Boyette, did you have anything further?
Thank you, Mayor. Vic, obviously the ice hockey pad is the major thing. Can we just do an RFP for that period and then do an RFP for the rest of the complex so that it may take longer to do the rest of it, or just have two, or would one do the whole thing?
Just the pad for the hockey, that particular site is probably more conducive to what they're going to build there where we're talking about the whole complex, getting the infrastructure for the whole complex, get the paving going and everything. So all the other pad sites will be ready, for if anybody else comes along. I don't know if that's answering your question or not, but
Well, my question is, would it expedite the thing if we just did an RFP just for that one pad and then do an RFP for the rest of everything else, which may take longer? Just a thought.
I don't know, maybe I'd have to ask Andrew that question. He's with collaborative design. I'm not familiar with all that process, so.
Greetings, Council, Mayor. Excuse me. There's some efficiencies to the site plan being packaged with the courts that as a single design team. I would say tease out through discussion tonight. If there is a major headwind against the courts initiative, but from Spur's perspective, it's, key to our master plan and that vision. And then there is then that added benefit of the site development being paired with that one design team handling all those factors at once. There would be efficiencies to that. So that'd be sort of the biggest or one of the major arguments to move forward with it all as once, but it certainly is on the table to split those up. It'll just be a very similar presentation to what you already heard to get the courts portion and then a whole nother RFP process to pull another design team together. And then there's that additional coordination that would occur. Hopefully that helps clarify.
Councilor Boyette, did you follow up there?
So all you want is a yes tonight? Is that really what you're after then?
Basically, just to tell Mike and his staff and work with the suburban board to go ahead and get a design hired to get moving forward, yeah.
Okay.
One thing that I guess I'd like to add is that, we're running against the clock on how long we can run those bonds, and every delay we have just shortens up the amount we can, use for this project. So time is of the essence, and that's why I would prefer to go both at the same time.
Thank you. Councilmember Tidswell?
Dick, I don't know if you can answer this or not. Would the development and the construction of the ARC run concurrent with the South Park pool? Is that two separate
issues.
Separate issues.
But
okay.
What I want to stress is that we're willing to work with the council on that South Park pool however we can to help you.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Absenleiter?
I think I'll hold mine until public comment is done.
Thank you very much. I guess I have a question for Mike Pigg, which is, Mike, what do you think of all this, and what do you want to, do you have any questions for us or direction? Because we're talking about giving you direction, and your staff and city administrators. So is it being, are we being sufficiently clear in this discussion for you?
Mayor and Council, so I guess what we were looking at is two different RFPs, but we would like to run them simultaneously. One to do the court facility and the infrastructure. That allows us then to completely identify the pad sites so that then we can run the correct infrastructure into those pad sites and provide the parking and all that's necessary. It's two RFPs is what we would like to come out of with tonight.
And just to clarify, am I saying it correctly? The first one would be the whole site that would also include the city's vertical structure. And the second one would be the hockey complex. That'd be the number two. Is that correct?
Correct. Working forward, the one to create the courts and all the infrastructure. The second one would be an RFP to determine the use of those pad sites. Yes, the pad site for hockey or whatever group comes in with that RFP. Yes.
And is there any reason we couldn't proceed more or less simultaneously with both? Or are you contemplating we have to go forward with the larger site complex first?
No, I think they run together, yes. So, but we're going to need both, I think, because to identify that pad site exactly, what is available and then how to bring in that infrastructure, it all has to be tied together. Stormwater, all of those items need to run together.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Rassenleiter,
just
go ahead.
I'm looking for further clarification on your question, and I'm going to direct this to City Administrator Kukulski, because we talked about this last Friday, and I don't want there to be confusion about two RFPs, because really one is a design and construction, design RFP. The other is a proposal for who may get the lease on the pad site, and that's a legal process that we have to go through. So maybe, Chris, you can expand upon that and help clear that question up.
I guess I think that it's consistent with what you just said, Councilmember Aspenleiter, Councilmember Rupsis, and Director Pigg, which is we the thing that's under the tightest time frame is the ICE facility. That being said, we believe the cleanest and safest way to make sure we do that process and bring it to conclusion is there needs to be an RFP to select who's going to do that. And so that is that separate one that deals with the pad site and what ideas come to the table to building ICE on what is identified there in this concept. I guess they're not numbered, but it's in purple, pad site there in the bottom right-hand corner.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
With that, though, these separate, but we don't want it to, it won't slow that down. Let that get going. Maybe that one even gets awarded sooner than the overall. We do need the work going on parallel because the infrastructure, including parking and all, feeds all these sites. So maybe it's not so much that pad to the upper right-hand northeast corner, but definitely, at least the way this concept is laid out, the hard courts and the ICE really need to be coordinated, at least on parking infrastructure, which is in the concept our public responsibility. And we'll need to define that some so the people who respond to our RFP know what we're going to bring to the table in order to have them put a decent proposal to us. But we certainly understand time is absolutely of the essence because we understand that several $1 million has to be committed, if not spent, by the donor in this current calendar year.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification. Councilmember Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I think this question is for Director Pig. We've talked about, for many years back, Sabura committed money to put in this turf soccer field, and I think that comes within your tenure in the Parks Department, that there was money committed to putting in the second turf field. What I wanted to ask about is, in instances, say, in Stewart Court or in the Heights, or wherever we have other rec facilities that are used by different leagues, what buy-in do those leagues have for development of that park, like Stewart Park or whatever? And my concern here, or my question is, there's a tremendous number of leagues that use the soccer fields at Amon Park, and they pull in the tournaments from people outside of the state of Montana, outside of the city of Montana. So what's a good buy-in for Amon Park leagues for a second soccer field? Thank you.
Mayor and Council, Councilmember Joy. So I just to clarify your question, you're asking what sort of commitment should they be making towards this? And so how I look at that is I think their commitment is in the operations. So they commit to operating that facility, and they put aside a large chunk of money every year for the rebuilding of that surface as it wears out. They're putting away money for that. So they're doing the organization and the running of that facility, and then also they're putting away a large amount of cash every year for reinvestment into the field as it wears out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bowen.
Thanks, Mayor. So, Dick, I had asked you this question before, and I don't know if maybe you just haven't got an answer yet, but of the 21 million, how much of it is the infrastructure and how much of it is the courts?
Approximately 4 for the infrastructure and 17 for the courts.
Okay, so I understand, and I like the idea of doing an RFP. I think you've come up with a good proposal here. I like the idea of doing kind of all the horizontal stuff, right? But I'm afraid that the courts, especially at $17 million, we might need to have more discussion about it. And I get what you're saying about RFPing who gets the pad site. That makes perfect sense. But how much heartburn does it cause if, as far as we can go tonight, is just the pad sites and parking and all that, and not make a decision on the courts? Because that feels like it might need more conversation.
Well, what question would you have about the courts? Let me add in that, we won't know the exact costs until we get the bids.
Yeah.
And without, let's say that we're $1 million short to do what we want to do. We have money still available. We'll have increase in taxes before they will ever have to make a payment. I think we've delayed this project enough, and I'd like to see it get going.
Which is why I don't want to delay it. That's
Yeah.
why I'd like to give you the pads and let's
Yeah.
start moving. But, I mean, there's lots of questions about the court. You know, we don't know costs yet, and we won't know costs until we do more work. But who operates it? How's it operated? How much are we willing to subsidize? All those kinds of things just naturally come up when we're talking about a new capital project for the city. And I would hate to bog us down. So is there a path forward to do just the sites and parking and water and all the underground infrastructure?
That's up to the council's decision. My preference is we go forward with both.
I heard you. I heard you. Okay. And then I think that is all the question that I have for now. Thanks, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess maybe I'm misinterpreting what I'm hearing, but it sounds to me almost like the donors driving what's being built here in this whole this project in some respects. So I am a little concerned about that. It's nice to have a donor, wave $6 million in front of us. But I guess some questions I have about that is, I think I heard someone say that they're going to own and operate it. So that sounds like a good idea to me because we've done it before. The Oasis is one where they own and operate and that. So are we talking about that kind of ownership? They're actually going to own the pad, or are they going to just own the building so it'll be more of a leasehold, not really ownership, but they're leasing the pad?
Excuse me, but the way we were looking at it, it would be having a lease on the land, and they would own the building.
So they're going to have a piece of dirt there, and they're going to build from the dirt up on this, so they're going to lease that. Okay.
Right.
All right, thank you. I like that concept. So the city has no operational costs whatsoever on that, other than if they were to fail, then we'd have this building we have to maintain or.
Yeah, and that would be part of the agreement that would be drawn up is what the consequences are if this thing did fail, that the building would, come back to the city and then we'd run it that way. But right now, they are responsible for all the operating. We're looking at a lease, a minimum payment, an annual payment of $1, I guess. And, to help them also to reduce our costs to get this thing going better. The infrastructure is a big expense for them. If we, we're proposing that we cover that part of it for them too, so.
And so they're going to charge, they're going to be the ones, if they lease and operate it, they're going to be the ones who determine the admission fees and all of that kind of thing. Is that
right?
Or the agreement require some type of break for city residents?
I think it should require that, and I've talked to him several times about that. Hey, we want, it's very important that, if somebody's economic status, they can't afford to get in there, that they'll allow them to get in there just like we will on the basketball courts, the same kind of a concept. And
This RFP you're talking about would have all of that kind of stuff in it.
I don't know if it's the RFP or whether it's the agreement on the lease. I think it'd be more in the lease.
I see Chris shaking his head. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, and then I have some questions about the courts. Mike, can I ask you those questions? So I think Mike Boyette was going to ask you this earlier, but what is going to be the cost to the city to run these courts and to operate them annually?
Councilmember Neese, so it's really difficult to nail down an exact price right now because all we have is a concept on a piece of paper. It's a box. And so until we get that design all the way out and know are there other rooms for party facilities where we could rent those spaces out? Is there a room for, meeting rooms and things like that? Is there bleacher sections so that we can have a large crowd? The more crowd we get, the more money we bring in. Is the concessions area sized enough that we can provide, and raise that kind of revenue? So those are the numbers that it's a little hard to tell until we get a design that's out there. These numbers are based on that concept. Also, we talked with other facilities all around the country that are running similar size and styles of facilities, and these are what they're looking at as far as expenses and revenue. But until we have that design out there, it's really hard to come up with an exact amount.
Okay, so you don't know how much they're going to cost the city?
These numbers that we have projected up here are what we're projecting as the numbers based on the concept that we have.
Okay. And so 640,000, if I read that correctly, and the first year you're talking 200,000, so 400,000, roughly 400,000 lost, subsidized the first year.
Correct.
I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Mayor and Councilmember Neese, I'd also like to add part of the conversation last week with the group, and this will have to get ironed out. We just don't have it fully there, is with the TBID, Tourism Business Improvement District. The commitment they made to the overall recreation center and the bond that went down was they were going to cover the operational loss for the tune of what, it was a decade, it was several $1 million. They are a part of the conversation as well and are, as these details work out, interested in offsetting any operational loss. I don't want to overstate it, but I don't want to understate it either, that they are also at the table, understanding that where there's an operational loss, the heads in bed, the increase to the bed tax, those folks, rather than our regular taxpayers, will be the ones making up that difference.
Okay. And then Mayor, I had one more question regarding the economic benefit. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the gentleman.
Evan.
Evan, thank you. Evan, and the one here, it looks, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but 23.75 to 36.6 million in total economic impact. Yes. Where is that economic impact? Where does that go to?
So it goes across the board. So when you're looking at specifically direct economic impact, you're looking at specifically tourism revenue generators. So that's going to be the hotels and the restaurants.
Hotels, restaurants, retail.
Correct.
Things like that, okay.
Retail is very much, outside of that because there is quite a bit of, local spending on that. But you can take a generalized, look at what, an outside visitor is bringing in and using their credit card on to, have a general idea of what their spend is at the end of the day. So when you're looking at total, it's, it could be anything. It could be the trip to the hospital. It could be the, trip to Walmart. It could really be a whole number of different things. And I'd be more than happy to share with you a little bit more, via email, what that total economic impact looks like on a community.
Okay, so the direct is 12 to 19. So that's going to the hotel restaurants.
Correct.
Okay, so those are the owners of the hotels, restaurants getting that money, but then the 23 to 36 is more beyond that.
That's correct.
And other different trips and things like that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Evan, total included the direct,
That is correct.
so it's not above and beyond.
Yes.
No, yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. I have one question for Andy. And I have to say, Sabra, I really appreciate the thoughtful focus on South Park Pool. I feel like if we know there's a lot of hypotheticals in there, if council does decide to move forward, as you mentioned, that this number is not quite enough even to get to the option one. Andy, that 7 million, and if this gets bonded out as it's proposed, does that take it to the total amount that Sabra can bond? Is that where the limit is coming from?
Yeah, Councilmember Shaw, generally the limit is about $30 million. That number does get smaller each year, but each year that you don't bond, you're also not making a debt payment, so you have that cash. So it's going to be a combination of debt and cash on hand by the time we get there.
Okay, I just want to understand that. I feel like I've been saying this to the board, but I just want the sign off from you that if council moves down this road, by the time we get there, I don't want to hold up any of this because it's important we move forward now. But just knowing that capacity would exist at the point at which we would potentially be ready to access it.
Yeah, the only thing that would change that would be a significant decline in tax revenue, because that's what drives the ability to bond.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question. I'll save my comments for after.
Very good. Thank you, Council. At this time, let's open it up for public comment. And please come forward. Just ask that you tell us who you are. Keep your comments to 3 minutes. If there was a representative from the Tourism Business Improvement District, you heard the discussion earlier, and I think your role would be very important in this discussion.
Sure is. Thank you for your time. I'm George Maragos. I'm here as chairman of the TBID. Thank you. On June 5th, I sent a letter to Mayor Cole as well as the City Council, kind of detailing out our participation and what we would continue to do We are behind this project. We want to see ice. We want to see courts. And we will sit down at the table and be at the table. We're looking for information as well as you guys are. So as soon as we see those performance numbers and different things, then we will be able to determine what we can support, but we will be supporting this project, so on the operation, just like we were in the other, the bond issue that failed, unfortunately.
Very good. George, can we just maybe explain where your dollars come from? For somebody who might not be familiar and might be listening.
Every room that's sold in the city, it used to be a $2 per room fee, not a tax, a fee. We raised it as of July 1st. It went to $4. So there's $4 of each night room sold that all the properties are paying. And that generates the T-bid dollars that we use to, bring in events, subsidize events that, whether it be the Metro Park or hopefully ice here at Signal Peak Arena and the Amend court facilities.
Very good. All right, thank you, and appreciate you and the other hoteliers and your willingness to support this project.
Yep, we do, and we will.
Very good, thank you. Other public comment, please come forward. Is there any other public comment before we close the comment period?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Scott Hanser. I'm on the Suburban Board. And I'm just standing up here to tell all of you that the whole entire board is supportive of this project. Just a quick review that Dick talked about, crime reduction. Suburban's paying for the whole thing. The T-bid's going to pay for the operations and any losses that are in that until it gets rolling. Public-private partnerships, there's somebody with $6 million begging to dive into this thing. People talked about parking. There's 800 parking spots going to be there. That's covered. To fill the indoor athletic facilities that are just absolute need, and it's an economic positive for Billings. I mean, traveling ball and all these sports that are going on right now. I mean, if you just look at college football, a college football player gets paid to play college football. I played college football. They didn't give me a dime. Sports just
Maybe you can
generates.
go back and see if you can get on a team.
I get hurt now, but sports generates unbelievable numbers every year. Unbelievable numbers. And this thing will do the same. You just got to trust it, and you just got to, I'm asking you to just let us get moving. Just let us get started. And all kinds of things are going to come into clear vision. But everybody that wants to jump on this wagon needs your help tonight to get it going, okay? Really bad. Marketing and fundraising, we haven't even talked about that. That's a huge part of it. The Suburban Board has talked about and is ready to go. There's so many things that we're ready to go on. We just need you guys to just give us this first step so that, and I guarantee you, so many windows and doors are going to open because of you saying yes tonight that it's going to blow everybody's mind, so. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Other public comment? And if you would like to comment, just make a little line back there so we know who would like to speak.
Mayor, Council. Hi, my name is Debbie Potter. I'm the current chair of the Billings Chamber and also a business partner with Ide Bailey here in Billings, Montana. And just want to emphasize how important this would be for our community. For many of the reasons you've already heard tonight, for getting, a place for our seniors to exercise, a place for our kids to go, sports tourism, a way to generate revenue for our community, for our small businesses, to get people here, I'll say just to visit and then go home, right? So it's a win-win. And a huge, having a private and public collaboration to make this happen is, I think, what we've all been looking for and wanting. And to Scott's point, we're ready to go. We're ready to do this. And we have a lot of support from the business community. I know that our restaurants, hotels, the retail, every business owner here in town will benefit from having additional sports tourism, additional just people in town to support their businesses. So can't emphasize enough how important I think this is for our community to please, as Scott also said, we can move forward with your support. So please consider supporting the RFPs that have been presented to you and the ask for tonight. And yeah, thank you very much for your consideration.
Very good, thank you. Any other public comment? No one is coming. Yeah.
Mayor, City Council, my name is Carolyn Rexstad. I'm on the Suburra Board. This is kind of more on a personal note. I have a hair salon and in the Suburra, and I've been there almost 40 years. And I'm going to speak more from what I hear at my salon. It's / barbershop now. Basically, because of the TIF, Calhoun Lane got upgraded. It's a much better street. We have a lot more traffic, get a lot more drop-in traffic. And so business has picked up because of that. I hear a lot of, once they hear that I'm on the board, I get a lot of questions about what's going on. Where's the money going? What are we doing with it and that? A lot of questions in the last several years because they hear a lot about a possible rec center, and there's been things on the news about it, over the years we were going to do this and that, and then it gets out of the news. And so I really appreciate you taking the time to hear this tonight. I hope we get your support because I get a lot of questions about it. And people are excited, especially when they hear that there could be a walking track. I have elderly people that would love to use the walking track. And they're excited to think that the grandkids that they have would have a place to go after school from the schools around there from Newman. And so I hope you really consider doing this for us. And thank you again for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Any other public comment? Any other public comment? No one's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period. Back to council. Council member Aspenleiter.
If you're all right, I'll make a motion to kickstart the discussion part.
Please do.
So I'll move to direct staff to issue 2 RFPs, one for the pad site lease proposal process and another for the full ARC development site as presented tonight by the Espera board. To be clear, that is the entire facility, including the courts.
Second by Councilmember Rupsis. Would either of you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, thank you. I think this is a great opportunity. I am very appreciative of the Espera board for listening to what the community said last year and presenting us with an opportunity to take a Billings appropriate bite at this apple and do something that our community can afford and our community can latch onto and our community can really support. This is a facility that does give us an opportunity to take this in steps. And it's a proposal that allows us to do it in a way that we can take it as it comes. We've got a great opportunity with Signal Peak, who is very eager to get started. And that's an opportunity that I hope through the RFP process vets itself out. But, we're presenting an opportunity to any other group to look at this. This is not a cut and baked process, which is why we're putting an RFP out. So I think staff has been very thoughtful. Chris and his team has been very thoughtful in making sure that we're taking the appropriate steps to keep ourselves within the navigational beacons. And I think the SBorough board has been very open to ideas that maybe have not been necessarily comfortable conversations for them as it relates to expansion of the SBorough boundary and looking at how to help revitalize the South Billings Triangle and the South 27th Street. So I'm excited to support this. I think this is a great opportunity for our community, and I think this does check almost all of the boxes that didn't maybe get checked in the eyes of the public last year. So I'm hugely supportive. I'll be 100% behind it, and I look forward to being a yes vote.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rupses?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to just kind of second almost everything that Scott just said there, and I'll leave that as it is. But I wanted to focus on just the inclusion of the courts design, the courts facility design in that. I think that's important. Yes, we could delay that, but we're not going to be able to answer the questions, as Director Pig pointed out. We're not going to be able to actually answer the questions on how the facility will operate and what it can do, what subsidy might be needed until we actually get that design. So I think in that process, and we talked a little bit about this last week, the actual court facility design can be a little deprioritized through that RFP or through that site design process, so that we can push the actual site development plan forward first, and then move forward once that's completed and married up to the RFP for the leasing of the ICE pad site. Once those two are kind of in line, then we can just kind of progress into the actual vertical design of that courts facility. It'll be one part of one RFP project, but it'll just be kind of staged into two phases of that project. So I just kind of encourage council to go forward with that. Just because we're doing the design doesn't necessarily mean we're going to issue the bonds to build it, but it'll give us the answers that we need in order to make that decision. Thank you.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion. I'll just chime in that I'm a huge supporter of this. But Councilmember Owen raised the question about delaying the part or the courts component. I think Councilmember Rupps has addressed that well. I'm also a little skeptical that we're in a position to move ahead with that building. We haven't had the kind of public input that we should have, and we need to be humble about that and take this somewhat incrementally. But at least this will keep the ball moving, and it's very important that we keep the hockey puck moving, I guess, at this stage. Councilmember Owen, Neeson, Shaw, and Joy?
Thank you, Mayor. I concur, actually, and Councilmember Rupes' comments made me feel a little better. So first of all, I want to sort of echo a huge note of gratitude to the SBorough board. I think this has come a long way, and I think this is really a savvy way to approach this for the taxpayers. I do bristle a little when I hear us say things like the taxpayers don't have to pay anything, or this is all being funded by SBorough. Those are tax dollars, and they still belong to the public. So we still have to ask questions about how they're being spent, and I think that gets to my concern about the court's proposal. I love the idea of moving forward with this kind of as a lease concept, and I think we should do that in an expedited fashion and get that RFP out for who might operate those pads. But I just want to be really clear, and I'm looking right at our city administrator, I am not blessing today whatever comes out of that design process. I think we need to have further conversation, not to slow it down, but to be good stewards of the tax dollars. Even when they come out of a TIF, those are still tax dollars. And so I can get on board with this tonight because I really just want to commend the work that's been done here to come back with an innovative proposal. But I really want us to continue having conversations about what that design looks like, what it means, how far we're willing to go, and all of those things. So as long as we're all copacetic that there's many more conversations on the courts piece, I'm enthusiastically in support of this, and really just congratulations to the SBorough board for the work they've done.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Neese and Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. I also like the concept that as far as having this more public-private partnerships, and I do believe that we need to move forward on the RFE and the site design. But I'm kind of a hard stop in the courts until I heard Tom talk about how this would really give some better ideas, because we don't have, as we heard from Barks, that we don't know what it's going to cost and things like that. However, I would ask that the movement in the second consider that you actually, because the devil's in the details, the RFP is going to be for the whole process. And as was mentioned, by Tom, that it would be kind of two stages. I would ask that you put it into where you have an option A, option B, so that it actually specifies in the RFP that there's A and B in there, so it is two different items. Because I'm really concerned that we're going to, it's going to come back to the council and it'll just be one item and we're going to approve both items. So I also like the idea, again, that the idea of this being public-private, I think is a great idea. The soccer field, I'm assuming it's going to be under Amen Park. It says the court facility is city-owned. I'd like to see that say, we don't really know who it's going to own because that's going to be in the RFP process. I'd like to make sure that we are putting that out, not just to the city, but anyone who's going to want to run that pad, whether it's be courts or some other thing they want to run. So, but I will support this motion, but I would like to see it split into that second RFP into A and B section.
Councilor Shaw.
Thank you. I guess I want to echo, or I respect the comments I've heard, that there's still a lot of questions about the courts, and I don't think we have the information or want to dive too deeply into that tonight. So I guess my suggestion to staff would be to maybe come back to council with how this is going to work in terms of when we would expect to see something, at what point certain decisions need to be made, what questions can be answered between now and then, and the public engagement, because I think it can't just be at council meetings that this information is getting out. So that would be my feedback. All of which say I'm happy to support this.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You know, when we cut the ribbon for Amen Park turf field, when I cut the ribbon, I made this remark about really having a bigger vision for South Billings. And at the time, this has gone through many name changes. And at one time, it was called South Billings Rec Center. And I understand that there are different reasons why that might not be the best name. But the reason I liked it is because it starts to chip away at a perception and a kind of long-held thought that somehow South Billings didn't really have it together. Well, South Billings really does have it together. And when I cut that ribbon, I was like, big things are going to happen, not because I knew they were going to happen, because I want them to happen, and because I think South Billings can do that. And so I don't want to have a name that in any way would try to divide or make people of the city feel differently. But what's really important is that we chip away at the idea that any part of this city doesn't have tremendous amount of commitment and a tremendous contribution to this community. And this is it. So thank you. I will support it.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Boyette.
So Dick, it sounds like you're going to get a yes tonight. Give me some time frames. How long is an RFP going to take? It's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? When do you think you'll be back to us, give or take?
I'm going to defer that question to Mike, because I've never done one, so I'm going to work with him to help get it done.
So, Mayor and Council, we had that discussion today. We've already formed a meeting that would start tomorrow. If you guys say yes, we have a committee that's already getting ready to be set. We'll work through that RFP process just as fast as we can. They take time, because it's a big building and it's a big infrastructure, and then also all the legal components that we have to get into this public-private partnership, but it'll move quickly. I don't know exactly a timeline, though. I can't give you that.
Okay, thank you. Any other council members on this motion? We have a motion before us, and we're getting ready to vote unless somebody else says something. Okay, you hear the motion is for two parts, and to direct staff to move forward with those two parts, the master area, including courts, and then separately the hockey pad site. And we're doing the design of that, but it would be a request for a partner that would do the construction. The RFP, of course, would specify location and some other parameters. If the motion is clear, if in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for everybody's work on this. Now get to work, because you got a lot to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes item number 2. Item 3 is our last item of the evening. It is our strategic plan. We'll give it just a minute while people clear out of the hall.
Mayor and council, so, I'm sorry.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, this is a great time to take a break. Sorry, it's 7:30. The timing is good. Let's do that. It's been a while since we've actually done that. So 7:35. Let's come back as close in 5 minutes as possible. So between 7:40 and 7:45, we'll start up again. Hello, so we can hear his voice. And if you've been watching us for these past months, you got any critique, feel free, or, you were involved with a league conference I had today with our Legislative Affairs Committee, so thank you for participating in that. I know you then went off to a Community Development Board meeting today, so you're hitting the ground running. Welcome back, Wyatt.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and it's really great to be back. I just got back to Billings on Friday after 6 months of being down in Denver, 3.5 months of that in the hospital. So it was a really, really long haul, but I'm super excited to be back. I'm doing very well. I was just telling City Administrator Chris that I still have to be careful, in terms of crowds and getting sick and stuff for a while. So you'll be seeing me wearing a mask and stuff, and because I'm still on a variety of medicines that aren't great for that sort of thing. But doing really well, really happy to be here. Yeah, I was glad I was able to participate and work as much as I did down there. It was actually mentally helped me survive down there and just try to keep up with things. But there were some times where that wasn't possible. So it's been a long trip, but coming out the right end of it and doing really well.
Great, well, welcome back. And
You'll see me a lot more. I'm planning.
we understand, but we also understand when you're not present, and you should do whatever you think appropriate, and we appreciate your hard work over these 6 months remotely. So that was above and beyond, so we appreciate that. Very good. Thank you, Wyatt. Chris, item number 3 is our strategic plan. Thank you for your work on creating a draft. I should also just mention for the council, about 3 o'clock, a little before, we got a detailed email from Chris Glenn from the Yellowstone Valley Citizens Council that went into a number of additional items that they'd like to see added to these list of goals. I have not had a chance to read that carefully. It's 3 or 4 pages, fairly detailed, so I just want to make sure if you haven't seen that, you'll want to look at that. We don't necessarily have to take definitive action tonight, but I did want you to know that was out there. So Chris, with that, I'll hand it to you.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and yes, it's so great to see Wyeth here in the building. It's been several months I guess maybe it's been closer to 6 or 8 weeks that he's been participating via Zoom in a whole lot of meetings, but as he said, I think it was in February, wasn't it? We were having a conversation downstairs in the hallway, and 48 hours later, he's in Denver, and this is the first time he's been back. So we are just so grateful to have him back in the building, and what a hardworking, dedicated public servant Wyeth is, and proven that immensely. So here we are back, now that finally budget is adopted and done, Teamsters contract is negotiated, several other things that had us extremely occupied for the last several months, back at this conversation from March. And really, it's a conversation that's been going on for several years, because you know that what you have in front of you as the 5 strategic goals basically mirror what's already been adopted and is already in place. But our goals for tonight are either A, to confirm that we've captured in this draft, we've captured the voice of you, what you've represented, council, directors, administration in this document, and you want it brought forth sooner rather than later, maybe as soon as September 23rd for adoption, or no, it still needs work. And we fully expect, frankly, that if it does need work, then let's get after it. So that's the second part here. And if we do need to do more work, can we start at a high elevation and work our way down? Do we have the right strategic goals? Do we then have the right objectives and move in that direction? And so that's really what we want to find out tonight. Where are we in this process? And just as a refresher, right, what we have today are adopted strategies and priorities from May 9th of 2022. Those were multi-year. It's nothing on this list is just a couple of months long. Everything on the list takes years to do. That's the last time, though, we officially adopted, and that's when we have been working off of. We had a couple of retreats, but the most recent one, March 15 and 16, You've got the notes from that retreat on August 19th, so just a few weeks ago, during or right after the council meeting, it drafted out this draft that you have in front of you with only a couple of tweaks since then. Then in August 23rd, added to the weekly so that the public could see it before this packet came out. And then, of course, it was included in the packet material for tonight. And I guess, frankly, with no further ado, do we want to start this conversation relative to whether we have got these strategic goals correct? Whether you want to get rid of one or several of them, or without completely getting into wordsmithing, the intent here, though, is to capture. So let me turn it back over to you guys at this level.
So your question, is that a good goal?
There are 5 of them there.
Okay, so you want us to talk about all of them, or potentially? Okay. Councilmember Nish, you had your hand up?
I did, Mayor. I want to address the first goal because in 22, the goal was improve the safety of Billings. And now this goal one is actually 2 goals as I read it: improve the health and improve the safety of Billings of all residents. I think we're trying to do 2 things in this goal that should only be 1, which is still the safety of the Billings for all citizens. If you want to add a 6th goal put in the health, that'd be different. But I think in my opinion, I think the primary goal should be improve the safety of the residents of Billings. We have to keep that on focus. Is that safety is the number 1, not 2 different goals at number 1. That's my opinion. And let me ask you this: why did you add health? Why was health added to this?
It was added. Sure.
Mayor and council, I'm going to jump in. So, you'll see that one of the things I tried to do with all of these goals and objectives is to put the feedback that you provided. So on this particular one, Councilwoman Owen made a point at our retreat. In our notes, you can see it. You want to have the word health in that goal. And we had a long conversation about that, and that's why health went into that goal.
Mayor, can I respond to that quickly?
Sure.
So just to be clear, I have said and will continue to say that public health and public safety are intertwined. That is different, in my opinion, than health itself, which would mean things like, Riverstone's health goals and all those sorts of things. So I saw the comment was bracketed in the notes, and I'm wondering if that's maybe because there was a clarification. So I believe that public health strategies are a way to address safety. And so I don't want to confuse the idea of overall health, injury prevention, access to quality nutrition, the things that health promotion does with the importance of public health strategies to achieve public safety outcomes, addressing root causes of crime in the community. So I just want to clarify that. I see Chris is fidgeting. So I am not convinced that health itself is a goal as much as it is a strategy for the goal.
So I would like to find, and we might get outvoted here, but I think this is an area where you and I are very much on the same page, Councilmember Owen. I think, however it's worded, I did propose it that way, and we both spoke in support of it. We may not have gotten I may not have gotten this wording right, but I would ask you, what is it, public health? How do we include the public health pieces that tie to safety? Because in all due respect, Councilmember Nice, I think it is fundamental to improving the safety of our community.
So I know the mayor isn't going to want to wordsmith here, but I might suggest it still improve the safety of Billings through all citizens, including addressing root causes such as public health issues or something to that effect. But I might posit that health piece, Gavin, as a strategy or an objective or something rather than a goal in and of itself.
And Chris, if I may respond to your question, I agree that it would be, as Councilmember Owen explained, I think that would be appropriate under the objective section, because it's an objective to get to public safety. And so I think it would be better to add that and depending on where you want to rank it, but another objective in there saying the public health to whatever it is to help, create a safer city. So I think that just needs to be moved from the actual goal to the objective. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Rufus?
Well, we've had any number of conversations, whether it was Councilmember Owen's presentation on ACEs at our retreats or whatever, that tie public health and public safety are one and the same. There is no error between those two goals. If we're talking about, nutrition and housing stability and those kinds of things, those are directly related to both public health and public safety. There is no differentiation between the two of them. Every single component that you look at, with the exception of possibly the, police response, has to do, the critical factors for both public health and safety are essentially the same, except for the actual emergency response at the very end in crisis situations. So I would argue that if we're going to change anything, we should just say improve the public health and public safety, if that's really, that's what we're talking about. And if that makes people more comfortable with that, then that's great. I think we all understand what we're trying to get to. If you look at all the objectives related to this goal, they are primarily related to safety measures. But the way that we may address some of those will include both components of public health efforts as well as traditionally recognized safety efforts. So I'm fine with the goal. If we want to put the word health public in there, I'm great with that too. I think we all understand what we're trying to get to. We're not taking over the ER services from Billings Clinic, or we're not taking over Riverstone Health. That's not what we're trying to do. Nothing in this document indicates that. We're really talking about a fundamental understanding at the city level that public health and public safety are so intertwined, you can't separate them.
Yeah, and I'll just comment, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. It's a little hard to define maybe what public health means. So if we could be specific, I'm not saying be that specific in this half a sentence, but it's things like substance abuse that go straight to issues of public safety. It's issues of mental health, prevention and treatment that can trigger issues of family violence. Maybe even prenatal care that prevents fetal alcohol syndrome and other things that contribute to all of those things. But not, I've got a sore knee and I do need a new knee. But so there is a line, but how you define between that, we don't know. We'll leave that to you guys. But we agree on the concept, I think, right? So do we want to give more specific direction? I'm not sure that we've given staff super clear the direction here. Anybody, Councilmember Owen?
I guess, Mayor, I would just reiterate that I think it is true that much of the safety challenges we face in this community have their roots in, at least the prevention strategies would have their roots in public health. But as you rightly indicate, things like access to health services, for example, are not within our mission scope, and I don't think there's any objectives here that suggest that they are. I still would be more comfortable with suggesting that addressing public health needs is a tool or a tactic rather than a goal in and of itself, because it does belong to the county. Public health belongs to the county. And I don't want there to be any confusion about mission area. So I would still rather modify this a little bit just to make it clear that we're not creating new mission areas for the city, but rather acknowledging the clear fact that if we're going to get at root causes of crime, we have to have a public health lens on it.
Okay. So maybe the emphasis should be something like, and I know I am words something, but improve the public safety of Billings, including public health or something along those lines that puts the emphasis on public safety, but says, don't forget that this is a component.
I hope, my perception is this is probably the most difficult one. It's clearly been the most important one, but it was deliberate to include health and safety in the context that you've talked about it. But at the end of the day, however you guys want to tie the two together, If you want them tied together, I think we should directly tie them together, not leave that as a question mark.
Okay.
Do you want to move
Councilor
on?
Joy?
Thank you. I was just thinking of some things I wrote down that are of our concern, that are health-related. Car accidents, our intersection. We're thinking we want a study bill to figure out how to reduce injury and death with car accidents, pedestrian deaths, something that we address through different things. And even I was writing, Councilmember Reps has said, even down to our response, that may be an area where health isn't a component, but actually behavioral health and mental health are a part of our emergency response. So I can't, except for maybe vaccinations and access to healthcare, I can't think of really anything that we don't touch on. Even I'm thinking about the food desert, and our response is a community. We have 2 community gardens, and those gardens also have a market where people have access. So I'm really struggling to find an area where, exclusively we are not tied to health. Thank you.
Okay. How about the other 4 goals? Anybody want to take exception to them? Gavin, you wanted to chime in there?
I would just like clarity, because half of you just said you wanted it in there and half said you didn't. What's your pleasure?
Vote. Let's get some clarity and vote.
Whether to include public health in this goal.
I haven't heard anybody say they don't want it.
Yeah, I didn't hear half.
Okay, how would you like that written?
I don't know that we're going to be able to do good drafting as a committee. That never works out really well.
So, Mayor, if I may, I completely understand where you're coming from, that the word health, but to Councilman Rips's, none of the objectives fall or creep into the county's purview, in my opinion. Saying, comma, including health, that makes a very arduous goal.
So let me just ask maybe then a clarifying question. Chris, you want this strategic plan agreed to by council to guide your work. Do you consider then that what have you got here, 11 objectives? Is that it? Or do you believe if we adopt this document that you have authority to do anything that you reasonably feel falls under goal 1? Does my question make sense?
It does.
Because, the amount of wordsmithing matters, right?
Yeah.
If what Gavin and Tom are saying is correct, that we're just focusing on these 11 objectives, then yeah, I think it matters less what that goal says.
The 11 objective, the
11,
strategic,
right? Yeah.
the strategic goal and the objectives matter.
Yes.
Does it mean we don't do anything except for what's on that list? No. We do other things that fit, but these are the priorities, and they're the things that the council has given their blessing, 6-5 or 11-0, to prioritize. So nothing should ever go on in this organization that's contradictory to what you adopt, but do we have every listed thing that could complement or be? No, we don't. Am I answering your question? Mm-hmm. And candidly, why I proposed health, maybe in the wrong way, was to make a statement that it isn't just about safety in the way that some folks do think about safety. They just think about the lights and sirens response.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm just struggling with the idea of health as a goal in and of itself versus a strategy to achieve safety.
Sure. So what I would say is, let's throw some, you guys help us here, not right now, but how to word this, and we can push some things back and forth to try to get it right before it shows up, whether it's September 23rd or whatever that time is for adoption. And then one last reminder, I hope I'm right in this, it's the city county health department. It's not just their health department. It is our health department too. You want to move on to the other 2 through 5?
Would you be sufficient if it were as simple as improve the safety of Billings for all citizens, comma, including by improving public health? Improve the safety of Billings for all citizens, comma, including by improving public health. Is that too simplistic? It just says, adds the word public in front of health, basically, but it puts the emphasis on safety.
No, I agree it does, and I think by doing that, you're moving, I think, as Councilmember Owen said, I think that public health it's an objective, and with many different options, the nurse partnership,
Nurse family practice.
Thank you. Yeah, nurse
yeah,
family partnership.
we know.
Yeah. So that kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of things that maybe we didn't. I think it really belongs on the objective. A lot of these things on the objective are reducing crime or emergency responses and time and stuff like that. But probably more things of public health should have been under that objective too. But by putting something there, we're including the public health opportunities, then under the objective, I think that would allow it to expand more under the objective side of things. But it all, again, as that public health relates to the fact that we want a safe Billings, whether it's crime or health, public health, or whatever it is. So.
Councilmember Rowan, you started this conversation, so.
I caused this problem, now I need to fix it.
We needed you to tell us where to go on this.
Well, I'm always happy to tell us where to go, Mayor. Here's what I would suggest if I were to wordsmith live. I would revise this to say, improve the safety of Billings for all citizens, including advancing public health strategies that address root causes of crime. That makes me feel comfortable.
I, for one, am comfortable with that. Could you say it again?
Yes, I can. Improve the safety of Billings for all citizens, including advancing public health strategies that address root causes of crime.
Okay, we will draw it up that way.
I
got one head nod and one thumbs up, Mayor.
Yeah,
I like it.
The only question I raise is, is there any element of public safety that we're talking about that is not just crime? So we're not trying to say public safety is only crime, are we?
I mean, I might, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe we could continue that conversation
That'd be my
with some
concern
reflection.
about
Yeah,
that
that's a fair concern.
So.
How about I email you all?
Yeah, and then we can do some email back and forth. Okay, but we should move on.
We should move on and recognize the objectives tie directly to the strategic goal, whatever it's worded. So if somebody could read something into an objective that doesn't belong with the intent of the strategic goal, then it shouldn't be in there. Or if it's missing something, it should be there. So.
And Mayor or Chris, is the plan to go through each of the goals and then dive into the objectives, or are we going to go with the objectives under one?
I thought first it was, do we have the right 5 strategic goals? And then we would go another layer down.
And, yeah, we got till tomorrow morning. If we may not get to
I think
all
we
that,
handled
but-
the toughest one first.
But we're trying
But
to
maybe
just make
I'm
sure the
really far
goals are good at this stage. So we'll stick with the goals. How about number 2? We'll just kind of keep going through. If anybody wants to say anything, otherwise we're going to move on to item number 3. Item number 2, sustain and upgrade critical infrastructure. Appreciate the point. Steve raised a question, public comment. Council, we're now talking about real merits. We don't have a presentation, so if we don't ask for public comment, we're going to go ahead and start making decisions without that. So what I'd like to do is hear from public comment, if there is public comment now, and then that way we can take that into account as we talk. So if there is any objection, yes, this would be a great time for public comment.
Radically change the subject here. So My name is Steve McConnell. I was the city forester here I'm retired now. It's 3 months, 3 days, not that I'm counting. And what I would like to address is I guess I feel like urban forestry is in this document everywhere implicitly, but it's not in here anywhere explicitly. And I guess I'd like to have a lot of things. Every single one of the strategic goals has urban forestry in it, but we don't have somebody targeted to do those aspects of urban forestry. We've always in Billings assumed that they'll be done implicitly somehow, but no one's ever been assigned to be directly in charge of urban forestry. And I guess one of the slides that Chris brought up first on was about how we are all informed. I feel like the city council has never been adequately informed about urban forestry. Every process that we have to provide information about urban forestry has been stymied. We should have a tree board. It's one of the requirements for being a Tree City USA. We've been a Tree City USA for 40 years. We don't have a tree board. We have a park board that the DNRC, for whatever reason, accepts. And at that park board, if they talk about trees at all, they only talk about park trees, but mostly they talk about toilets and parking lots and courts and basketball hoops and recreation programs. Trees never get addressed and never get brought to your attention. We don't have a tree board. I was told there'd be one starting in January. City Billings got a fairly substantial grant, and as part of that, wanted to up our forestry game. That still hasn't started, and I don't know when it will start. The forestry department is housed within the Parks and Recreation Department, but it's not very important to them. They view they view trees largely as ornaments that make parks look nice, but they don't really have a lot of value, attach a lot of value to them. They don't understand the cost savings that can be done. They don't understand that they're important for health. They don't understand that they're important for public safety. There's tons of data that show that streets are safer, crime is lower, quality of life is higher. People want to live in towns with trees, and they want to raise their kids there. They want to start a business here. And without trees, we're a dusty, crime-ridden city on the plains where people drive loud trucks because they can get away with it. And it just seems to me that we need to have a different focus. We need to have a quality of life focus, and that trees will help bring that to us. So I guess I don't have a whole lot of time. I just wanted to introduce the subject. It's been something we fought for a long time. I guess I'm a little frustrated. We got there was a grant for $1 million to bring trees to disadvantaged parts of town. I haven't seen any promotion of that whatsoever. I haven't seen any advertising. To me, that should be a top billing thing. It was supposed to be a transformative activity to get that. It was supposed to be a way to engage with parts of the town that we have not really accommodated very well, and yet we have not yet done that. And so I would like to see that happen. So.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And I'll just comment, I didn't read it closely, but Chris Gallen's, that detailed email also addresses this issue. And if I remember right, and I think probably makes some specific suggestions about where to include the concept of urban forestry, I think is also in that email that we got from her. So
yeah,
take a look at that.
Yeah. So, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you want.
Any questions for Steve?
Yes.
Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. Have you heard of any statistics that relate rise in temperature with rise in crime?
Yes, there has been.
So for degrees warmer that your city gets, you get degrees of violent crime being committed?
I think so. Up into there is a peak level past which people it's just too hot to go out and do crimes. So at that point, but eventually it cools down. So, but it is largely correlated with that. So.
Thank you.
And I guess just one other thing, we're the only city in the state that doesn't have like a comprehensive way of doing forestry. We're the only ones that has it parsed out. And so it'd be nice to have a consultant come in and give a presentation like we had earlier for the rec center or something, because there's a lot of information out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, very good. Any other public comment on any of these goals or implementation strategies?
Good evening, everyone. Ben Halverson. I am a domestic violence prosecutor for the city of Billings. Most of you know me, not breaking news. I want to bring your attention to, and perhaps caution you, related to objectives 1 and 2, related to strategic goal number 1, specifically reducing family violence by 15%. I want to be very clear about what we on the law enforcement and community shelter services can do to disrupt violent crime and what we cannot do. I would suggest to you that I do not have any control over who commits domestic violence. I only have control over punishing them for committing those acts. A better goal, or a more realistic approach to consider, is targeting the children, the child witnesses of these crimes prior to their ascension into the criminal justice system. Because by the time they get to us, it is too late. The vast majority of them, it is too late for us to do anything to fix. And when we convict them, they go back out on the street. I have no control or ability to prevent them from committing an act of domestic violence. Katie Nash and Aaron Lambert are here, and I believe that they would support my position regarding my caution as to those first and second goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? Any other public comment on these strategies? Okay, we'll close the public comment period then. Back to Council. Councilor Raffenleiter.
Just a question for Ben, maybe following that up. Going down your caution of setting statistical numbers. Statistics are something I think everybody wants a metric, right? Everyone wants a metric to say, hey, are we being successful in what we're doing? Is what we're doing measuring out in our community, and how do we continue to adjust strategy if we don't have metrics to tell if we're being successful or not? I think what I struggle with in making modifications to this is that we don't have a metric, and big ambiguous things lead to very little results, because and when there are results, it's hard to say, yeah, we've been successful. Well, how have you been successful? When my neighbor asked me, well, how did you improve, family violence? And I said, well, it's gotten better. By what? By what metric? And I think that's what I'm struggling with. So I guess I'm curious to see, to get your perspective on, if we're not going to set some aspirational metric or target, how would you rework those to give us something to say, hey, we are making a difference, or we still have work to do based on this or a lack of this?
Certainly, Mayor, Councilmember Aspenlater, one metric that I think we work on and would love to track more rigorously is preventing re-victimization, specifically re-victimization of the same victim, either by the known abuser or a future abuser. That is an achievable metric. Again, that takes a lot of work on the shelter-based side, on the victim advocacy side, and what we do one-on-one with victims when we're meeting with them. That is an achievable goal. Another goal, preventing the child who's a witness or the child who contacted 911 to report an act of violence, doing what we can at that early stage to prevent them from being somebody that I prosecute. This happens, I've been doing this job for 10 years now. I've already prosecuted generations of families. It is one of the most depressing parts of this job to listen to a 911 call 9 years ago when I was brand new, and now I'm prosecuting that same kid. There was no intervention. There was no ability to help. Being able to go back and say, we stopped that child from going down that path, that is an achievable metric that we do have some control over.
I'll let Jennifer go.
Okay, Councilor Owen.
So, Ben, thank you. I think you're 1,000% right. I hated this objective from the minute it came up, because I think if we work really aggressively, we might actually see violent arrests go up and prosecutions go up for a while, and they should, right? So I hear what you're saying, and I think the re-victimization metric is brilliant, but I wonder about, is there a way, I'm just going to ask this question differently. Do you think that part of addressing the child is giving them a better voice in the proceeding?
Mayor, Councilmember Owens, the child advocacy component, as it relates to the DN system, is out far outside my wheelhouse. I can't comment on that
No,
intelligently.
I mean in the prosecution of domestic violence cases, taking better testimony at the scene without impinging on a forensic interview, giving them more ability to advocate throughout the prosecution process. That's what I was getting at, Ben, sorry.
Certainly, something that we would love to do, but there are important considerations to take into place and what we can do at the misdemeanor level. For example, if we have a child who is over the age of 14 and a victim of an offense, if the parent is not a participant in the criminal case, the non-offending parent, it is very difficult, in fact, almost impossible. We will lose our grant funding if we compel by virtue of enforcing a subpoena against that child. And there are other considerations to be wary of. If we are not going to secure a conviction, that minor child has testified against a parent that is going to return to the home. Securing convictions in those cases are very difficult. I've lost many of them in the past. Yes, to answer your question, but it will take a lot of extra work and more resources that we just do not have. For example, forensic interviews for children in those situations. I think we would love to be able to do that. We do not have the resource to do that. I can't speak fully to that. Officer Nash certainly could better than I can. But certainly that would be something that would be helpful.
I just want to invite you, from my perspective, keep offering up other better metrics. And same, Aaron and Katie, just give us better metrics, because I do think Scott's right. We need to measure things, but an overall reduction is probably not the right metric right now. So open door to send more metrics that make sense. Thank you.
Ben, would you just rewrite 1 and 2? Give us your, I mean, not rewrite, but I mean, you really don't want us to be doing this, right? I mean, it's better if it's coming from you. So I give you carte blanche to do it with Gina and Chris. We want to hear from you, but you're not going to like what we come up with, I fear. I'm telling you, your employee is what to do. I don't want to get in trouble with you two, but that's what we want, right?
Yeah, we welcome Ben and our subject matter experts' perspectives, as well as your policy perspective and what you represent. Both of those things coming together is what gets us to the place that where we need to be.
Tell us what you want specifically. I'm going to go back to Councilmember Asplund because he started this in Councilmember Dre.
Ben, I appreciate that. I love the re-victimization metric. I think that's a great idea. And I think that's something that is meaningful and measurable, and it is something that, with the introduction of the Family Justice Center and working with the YWCA, I think we can use that as a meaningful and measurable metric to tell if we're having the desired impact. The violent crime statistic, I agree with Councilwoman Owen. We're likely to see this go up before it goes back down, and how we properly gauge success when setting metrics like that is very tricky. But I don't want that to be the reason to get away from using a metric. You know, I still want to see some level of accountability to the system. And how we do that, I'm more than interested in your guys' perspective on that. So I would agree with the mayor. Like, I'd love to see some thoughts from your team and from Aaron and your team, Katie, as to what that would look like in reworking objectives 1 and 2. But I think the metric on re-victimization is a wonderful idea.
Great. Councilmember Joy. Councilmember Neese, did you have a hand up? So Councilmember Joy and Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. How about a qualitative objective? Qualitative and not a quantitative. I very often, when you're talking about very complex human behavior, you can't always measure it very well. particularly if you have only recently started taking data, you have very, very small numbers, and they're very easily misrepresenting the progress or the lack of. Would it be possible to have something qualitative, not quantitative? Thank you.
Mayor, Council Member Joy, yes, so let me start by saying, I believe Gina presented a statistic based on how many victim meetings prosecutors had individually one-on-one with victims over the last federal fiscal year covered by our grant. And those victim meetings are incredibly productive, particularly with regard to disposition of the criminal case and favorable dispositions related to convictions. Quantitatively, it's important to understand the resources and time that goes into those meetings. It might not just be one meeting, it might be many. It might not happen the first time, it might take years. But I've been doing this long enough that, yes, if a victim's re-victimized by somebody completely different, that is not what we want to see. But down the road, us maintaining those positive relationships and trust with that particular victim, if a case doesn't work out, is critical to making the next case count and sending a victim on a different path.
So just to follow up, so you're saying that it's possible to have a qualitative type of objective for that?
Yes, I would.
Okay,
I don't want to commit to anything too specific, but yes.
thank you.
Councilor Bernice?
Thank you, Mayor. Ben, thanks for coming up and giving your perspective on this, because this is well outside my wheelhouse, and that. So I appreciate that. You mentioned something that kind of really hits me hard as far as because I've seen this before, and as I've known people, is that generational repeating from what they were a victim, and then they've now have grown up now and they're the victimizer. Is there, again, we're trying to look at the root causes to prevent that from happening. And this may be outside your wheelhouse on this, but I mean, that's the whole idea when we're looking at these objectives and goals, is things that we can help prevent that type of thing. I mean, one of the things that we looked at was the Nurse Family Partnership Program that helps from, infant to 2 years old, and helping to get that so they don't grow up into that in crime. So what is it, there anything within that the council can do to help prevent that child from being the victimizer later on as they grow up? Or is that maybe outside of what you?
Mayor, Councilmember Neese, I actually do have some perspective on this. My predecessor, who did this job for almost 8 years prior to me, and Officer Nash, attempted many times with their legislature to create a standalone or subsection offense of endangering the welfare of a child that would validate and create a separate offense for committing an act of domestic violence in front of a child. All that exists today is just simply a factor for a judge to consider when imposing a sentence. If I had it my way, it would be a standalone offense, because you were not just making one victim out of that, you were ruining a child's life, and you were creating a future criminal in the process. And that needs to be addressed. And our legislature has, for many sessions, rejected that completely. I would love to take a run at that again next session if possible. Obviously, your advocacy on that front would be incredibly helpful. We have learned lessons in the past about what worked and what did not work with advocating for that particular legislation. But I think that would be an important way to start that conversation.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I think we could assist with the legislative committee to try to move that forward as soon as possible. So if you could, we'll get back to you, and I'll get in touch with you so we can kind of get you on the committee to kind of talk about that. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So I think where we're at is we had public comment. We closed public comment. We've then dug into some of the specific action items under the first goal. But the original plan here was to actually look at the goals and make sure that staff is on the right path for these 5 strategic goals. So if we can just bring our discussion back, we're not going to be able to get through everything tonight. Chris, I'll tell you right now, don't put it on the September 28th agenda for adoption. But looking at item or goal number 2, and then we'll just keep on going down, sustain, upgrade critical infrastructure. 3, foster economic vibrancy through quality design neighborhoods and business districts. 4, offer outstanding library, parks, recreation trails, and cultural amenities. 5, cultivate a high-performance organization. Principle in our core values of integrity, service, stewardship, and collaboration. These goals are not new. They have been out there maybe before even the 2022 version. But maybe you want to fine tune, maybe you want to add, maybe you do want to change fundamentally. Or are we good? Councilmember Owen.
Mayor, I just have a question, Chris, for you. You know, obviously, the challenge here is we need to prioritize some things, which means we don't do some other things. So I'm trying to fight my own impulse here to add something. And I just kind of want your thoughts. When we talk about sustaining and upgrading critical infrastructure, I think we've mostly and rightly focused on public works and airport a little bit. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, especially given what we've done in the new city hall, the disaster response, emergency response, disaster planning side of things. You know, we've talked about the EOC at City Hall and whether or not there should be a remote EOC or if there should be some sort of capability, how we partner with the county on that. And maybe it's not a priority for this year, but one we talk about in our next strategic planning session. I'm just curious your thoughts of that piece of critical infrastructure.
I certainly agree, and we have the one here, Objective 8, dealing with a facility. And I guess you could say some of the other water plant, sewer plant, but generally speaking, you're right, this has traditionally been kind of core infrastructure, but I think we should expand it to include facilities. We own, I don't even know what the number is, but it's got to be hundreds of millions of dollars worth of facilities that we've not treated in the same way, that you only see one, but I think it should evolve into the future with more.
I guess maybe I'd put that on your kind of ticker list for our next strategic planning
Yep.
session is kind of where are we on emergency response, disaster mitigation, those sorts of things that really are critical infrastructure, you know, radio communications, backup generators, all those sorts of things, most of which I think are there. But, you know, Councilmember Boyette and I did a tabletop exercise that I think raised a lot of questions about where we are on emergency planning. So I wouldn't necessarily add it tonight, just wanted to put it on the radar screen.
Okay, anything else on these goals? We can come back to them, you know, you're not locked in, but Chris, my interpretation is you're not hearing a lot of desire to fiddle with goals 2 through 5, at least at this point. And then, so if that's the case, where do we go from here?
Then we've got, I think, slides that go that next level, right? Because then we started going by Objective 1 and the 11, or I'm sorry, Strategic Goal 1 and the objectives underneath. And I'll tell you, candidly, and we already started down the conversation, it's really difficult to hit this spot of metrics measurable for accountability, but not just putting looks pretty 10%, 10%, 10%. It clearly is not some type of scientific analysis that said, this is where we think we can get. But I have a brand new admiration for people who do strategic planning. I don't. That should be pretty obvious to you guys, how much time and effort it takes to really get this stuff at a point. You could take it too far, I think, for what we're doing, right? We're not paying somebody to come in here and spend the kind of time and money to really get it to a fine detail, but I want it to be useful to us. So the intent, Mayor, was to go now, okay, strategic goal, what objectives are we missing? Or
Okay,
should be taken off.
Councilmember Ripsis, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, I just have a question about number 6. Last I heard, our ISO level related to emergency response times actually improved. Why are we looking to, I mean, we can throw more money at it. Where are we coming up with reduce emergency response times by 10%?
Interestingly enough, and I'm looking at Kevin here, he may have to help me. So the intent, I don't believe this was just about fire and reduction of times. That being said, we've seen the first draft of the Center for Public Safety Management analysis on only the law enforcement side, not fire, because we didn't do that one. And our response times are going the wrong direction relative to some critical areas. So this was not meant to be just about ISO and fire. And I think frankly needs to be a whole lot more refined than this relative to, we just don't want to respond to everything faster, but the important stuff. So it's not, I don't know how to make this, how to not turn this from now it's 11 to 30.
Chris, should we just get rid of the by 10% and just so it says reduce
Yes.
emergency response, period? And then time is referenced down below. This is just one element of your emergency response. Councilor Ripsis, what do you think of that?
I'm a metric guy. I want to be able to, like Scott was saying earlier, I want to be able to tell that we've got an objective to actually accomplish something other than just, we want to feel better about it. So I was pulling up the actions related to this response time. It's a system development charge for fire services, complete Station 8, automatic aid agreement with Lockwood.
It seems like in that sixth
fire.
bullet,
It's-
upgrade
yeah.
station alerting system, reducing dispatch and response times by, and there you could specify the percentage if you.
So maybe I misspoke and you're saying all the actions are tied to fire, although I would say out of dispatch is for
Dispatch
all
there,
emergency
upgrade
services.
station alerting, that's dispatch, documentation of training activities, and update the CPSM analysis, I think is probably referring to the fire piece, because we're doing the police
Yeah.
already, so. It is heavily, with the exception of the couple that are dispatch, and maybe it just only needs to be focused on dispatch. Maybe it just needs to be talking, instead of response times, dispatch time, or whatever that is, to address those issues that we're actually seeing.
Open to that, and to your first comment, we are in an ISO rate, is that right, Kevin, of 2? Of all the issues this community faces, getting from 2 to 1 should never be on our list of trying to resource to get to, in all due respect.
And I would agree, unless there's a part of town that is an anomaly, and then we should focus on that part of town. I question for Kevin or anybody, but back on number 2, that's the reduced violent crime rates by 10%, which I'll just note we're now going into year 3, where each year we've reduced crime rates by about 10%. But the last bullet there is 20% reduction in gang membership. Do we have a way to measure gang membership, or Gina or Kevin or Chris? How do we measure gang membership? Everybody gets a card and we can find out how many cards were issued, or?
So, and I don't know if Lieutenant Lenny can answer this better, but back in my time when I was there and we're doing some gang work, yes, there's significant designators, what designates a person as a gang member, and they were keeping track of it at that point. I don't know if that's been revitalized or not, but yeah, they had to meet certain criteria, so it is something that could be trackable.
So you think it is possible to do this? Okay. Other, yeah.
Mayor, council. We currently do track our known gang members. When our street crimes unit or the patrol officers deal with somebody who openly admits that they're in a gang or meets the criteria that we've set, associates them with a gang, we do have a way of tracking that. We put that into our crime analyst, and we're able to keep track of a matrix of who's involved in what and what gang they belong to.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councilor Boyd, Councilor. Matt. Well, it looks like we have questions. Councilor,
Thought that was going to be easy.
Immediately come back. So There's this theory that continues to kind of float around the community, and I don't know how valid it is, but that we have this increase in juveniles trying to sort of earn their way into a gang or prove themselves or kind of try to formulate a little cell of a gang. Do we track that kind of pre-gang affiliation as well? And would that be captured in this?
Yeah, as long as they meet some of the requirements. I mean, we have our known groups that are well known to us, and then we get different sects, and they move within each other, and so we do track them as a gang member, even if they just claim to be. It's something that we do track. They're always creating kind of new groups and stuff. So it does not necessarily as a pre. I mean, we either track you as a gang member or you're not. And that's so nothing in the middle, but we are capturing the data as long as they're meeting that threshold of being associated.
Thanks.
Okay, Councilor Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm good.
Many years ago, I had a boss call me from Minneapolis and said, I want the delinquency rate at 2% every month for the next year. I said, great, and then I hung up and said, are you just stupid? You can't predict what people are going to do, like reduce property crime by 10%. Tell the cops go out and arrest every kid on the street. I mean, this doesn't even make sense. My thought is this: reduce. How about the trend of family violence? Have it reduced. The trends, but 10%, 10% per 10%. These are just plug numbers that we're throwing in here. They really, in my mind, they don't mean anything. You're not going to stop violence by 10% by just standing here. You need activities to do it. So I think that's kind of it's just a crazy way to do it by throwing numbers at it.
Councilmember Neese.
Mayor, I don't necessarily disagree with Councilmember Boyette's response on these numbers of 10%, because I think when we came up with them, they were just numbers. But I think the idea would be to look at, crime statistics, historical, where we would like to get, what percentages per year is going to take to get us to where we want to get, and maybe those things need to be better defined within the objectives and why it's going to be 10%. So maybe 10% is the right number because we expect to do over the next 3 to 5 years. Maybe it's not. And so that may be something that needs to be dug into a little bit more as far as how we come up with these numbers. But I agree, I think they were just 10% because it probably sounded good and easy to make.
Okay. Chris, I would say whenever we're picking a target, we're going to have to define the starting point. Where are we defining? Otherwise, we'll always be letting that number float by. Now, it depends when we adopt this, right? So I just encourage you to start thinking about what's the starting point. Is it the end of this year? Is it the beginning of this year? Or is it some point after? I don't know what the answer to that will be, but we're going to have to pick the date that's our comparison. Unless you already had that in mind.
No, I guess trying to help us first would be, the longer this list is, the more we're trying to be all things to all people, and we're not focused. So before getting all wrapped around what the percentage is, I think first it's, do we have too many in 11, or are there the right ones? Or are there things that should be gone? Then refine that into, okay, I can work with our team. How would you measure that and bring that back to you? And have that iterative process is what are the right metrics? Now I realize it's unpopular to say that any of these things aren't important, right? I don't care about traffic. But if you put everything here, then it's hard to focus.
Anybody have a reaction, Councilmember Aspenmeyer?
And this is a question for Gavin. Gavin, it feels like we're going right back into the 2-day planning session, and I don't think that's the intent or the best use of our time here. Do you have an idea of an effective, how can we effectively get through this and give you meaningful comment and keep this ball rolling? Because I'm going to fall asleep in the next 15 minutes, and I don't want to be here anymore, frankly. This is important, but we've stacked this on 5 hours of meetings now. So how do we get on track?
So, Councilman Aspenlighter, Mayor and Council, it's a great question. And really, the intent here is, did we capture the 5 goals? Okay? Do we have the things underneath, meaning the buckets? Remember, the goal's big, then the objectives, and then all of the action steps that go into reducing family crime by 10%. And maybe 10% is not right, and maybe that number doesn't need to be there. That's the operations. Okay? What are we missing? That's really the question that should have been, put forth. Under these 5 goals, are we missing something in the objectives? Or do you want to eliminate? I think right now we're looking at the same stuff since March that was shared with all of you, shared 3 weeks ago with all of you, and we're not really answering are these the right goals? Are these the right objectives? In my mind, and I don't want to be overly simplistic, that's what it comes down to. Not the action steps behind it, not the metrics. Do we have the right goals? Do we have the right objectives? That's it.
Okay. I'm pretty comfortable with the goals, the objectives, get into a lot of detail. But it's hard to imagine deleting any of those, at least on this first goal. I haven't looked at the other ones with any specificity. But I agree with Councilman Strassleiter. We've got a good start on this, but the hour is getting late. It's 8:45. We started at 4 o'clock with our, so we're gonna have to draw this to a close, but I don't want to cut off important discussion if there is any. I'm not quite sure where we're leaving this, except that I think we all now to start digging into this and maybe exchanging of emails, get it back on another work session. Maybe we should be talking more about process than the details of an individual objective. How do we move forward to make this as productive as possible? Councilmember Neese?
Sorry, Mayor, I was just going to ask Gavin a quick question. Gavin, and I looked through the notes and stuff, but I don't remember, how did the 10%, 90%, was that something that we decided at the?
Those were placeholders, and what we didn't get to.
They were placeholders.
What we didn't get
Okay.
to was exactly kind of what you've alluded to, though, like what are we comparing it to?
Okay.
Last year, 2 years ago, or is this a new baseline that we're looking at so that forward-facing, we're looking at a 10% reduction from this year? That has never been answered.
Okay, so these were really placeholders. So that really isn't, we didn't really say reduce by 10%. This was just a number we put in there that maybe at a later date like today, we would decide what kind of numbers or what kind of measurement, because we want to have a matrix to measure.
Yeah.
So it could be, instead of a percent, it could be violent crimes from 2,000 down to 1,000 or something like that, which is 50%, which would be awesome, but anyway.
Right.
Sorry, so that's what we need to kind of look at is maybe we need some help from the city to really, what would be a realistic matrix to measure, because I wouldn't be able to know that.
And Councilmember Neese, that's a great observation, and I'm not a police chief, I'm not our legal, I'm not a fire chief, I don't know what's realistic. These are my numbers, right? Based off the feedback, but for us to really get down to that granular level where the experts do put the real numbers in there, just need to know, are these the objectives we want to pursue?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And Mayor, I would say I agree with these are objectives, but I think we maybe need some assistance from the experts to really give us and plug in these numbers that what we actually want to, that they think they can achieve, which could make a difference.
Okay. So hearing, we need some backup for the numbers. Councilmember Rowan?
Thanks, Mayor. I think one of the things that I would hope at a future work session we could kind of parse out maybe a little more is that for the objectives at least, some of them in the way they're drafted are time limited and many are not. And I think getting our heads around, these are not annual objectives. They're not going to happen in a year, except for some will. And I think maybe getting a little bit more, check a box where they are time limited, where it makes sense to accomplish them in a specific time period. I think we need to kind of think through that, because I think that helps shift the order of operations within the strategic plan. So that's something that I would hope we could kind of think about holistically as we move forward to our next work session conversation about this. Yeah, and then I would just say, I do think we need one more work session.
Thank you, Councilmember Abslider.
And I'll just give my opinion for what it's worth under the objectives for strategic goal number 1. I agree with Chris. I think having 11 objectives on public safety is way too many. Some of this stuff, like Objective 10 and Objective 11, implement CGL recommendations and CPSM recommendations. I mean, that's functional, operational stuff that you guys are doing anyway. That doesn't need to be in here. And we're going to hold you accountable for those because those are their own standalone items. I think we really do need to prioritize and help give some directive to you and to the chief as to where do we want to focus. Right now, we're saying we want to focus on every kind of crime in this city, and we want to reduce every kind of crime. The reality is we can't do that, and the chief has said as much. So we really need to put some thought into this when we come back for a second set. Do we want to focus on family violence and violent crime? Do we want to focus on traffic safety and property crime? Like where do we want to put those things? Because it's not realistic, and we're setting ourselves up to fail, and we're setting our team up to fail if we want to try to set, these aspirational goals for every part of crime in our community. And so from my perspective, I would put the emphasis on violent crime and family violence. And we'll continue to work on those other things, but that, in my mind, is the priority for me. So I'd like to see this go from 11 to 6 and really pare that down and put an emphasis on what are the two of the 4. What are we going to put our resources and effort into? And I'd ask you, when we get into this the next time, let's not put this at the end of a work session. Let's put it at the beginning when everybody's got a little bit of focus and energy and effort and not petered out, so that we can have a fruitful conversation on this front.
Okay. Gavin, you had a question or
Yeah,
follow-up
Mayor,
on that?
a question for you and council is, so what I think would be a better way to direct this right now is, what do you want to see in the next document? Okay, do you want real numbers in that next document? Do you want us to look at some of these things? I think the last 2 objectives are great. Those are more action steps than anything else. Do you want us to do that tightening on our side? And then you kind of, you grade our work rather than us having this team effort?
Go ahead, please.
For me, I would like to have the input of the subject matter experts. Like, what do they think are reasonable and real metrics? And if these metrics and objectives need to be changed to better be suited to success, then that's great. Like, Ben's suggestion is a fantastic one to the family violence, to objective 1. So those types of things are what I would like to see. So we're not having this philosophical conversation and getting mired down in the percentages. Like, you give us the percentages that you think are real, and then we can talk about whether that's my perspective.
Thank you. Gavin, I might make a comment that one thing that's missing from goal 1, and it's understandable, but is any mention of public perception and public confidence in public safety. Rightfully so, this goes to actually the merits, right? Reduce crime. That's great. But that's a subtle difference between the public's understanding of that, and we don't want to try to hoodwink or pull something over the head, but we want the public to have confidence in public safety. And to the extent that we can work that into this somehow, I think we should try to do that. I like the idea of hotspot policing, for example, because it's highly visible and tends to increase that confidence level. But I just make that point that it's something that we also need to be sensitive to. Are we wrapping up here? Councilmember Denise, final word?
Well, maybe final, but Chris, I believe, when you get this document finalized, you kind of use this as your kind of outline of kind of what our direction to you is to do. And so at the end of the year when we do your performance review, I think often you see, I did this, and this on the list. And so I think I think some of these things, even though they're time-bound, like this two, objective 10 and 11, where you want to cut them off, I think they need to stay on there in the sense that, but I agree with Councilmember Owen, maybe they need to be a separate section under, these are expected to be done this year, something like that. But I do believe that these are, and again, we talked about this in May, and so a lot of these were what was hashed out at that time. I think they're good, and I think they should stay there. And if we don't want to address them, but I think it helps us to know, to review that, to say, okay, well, Chris, these are the objectives, how did you do on those when it comes time for his review? It gives us a good ability to measure him. If we just take this off and expect it to be done, again, where's the check to come back later on and say, did he do that? Or did he get back to us on that? This is really kind of our work plan for him. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Ripsis?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I forget who's brought it up, but I like the idea of saying, because so much of this is perception-driven, our objective is to get back to where we were 10 years ago, 2015, set the date, right? We know crime's been going up for 20 years. Since 2005, it's been on a steady trend up. Let's set an objective to get back to where we were 10 years ago. That's the objective. Now, you guys, you experts, say, well, these are the things that we need to do to get there. We need to reduce family violence in these ways. We need to, implement programs that reduce property crime in these ways, whatever. But those are the specific actions that will get us to that result. That's what we want. We want to, recognize that people don't feel as safe as today as they did 10 years ago. And so that's what we want to get back to. And in 5-10 years, when we accomplish that objective, let's get back to where we were in 2005. I think that simplifies this list of objectives greatly. And then we have actions that are specifically related to accomplishing that objective. And I understand that every department wants to have their name up here somewhere. If you don't have something specifically to add to that objective, which I think probably everybody does, it doesn't need to be in here, right? Doesn't mean it doesn't need to be done. It just doesn't need to be in this document. So let's simplify this a lot. The next slide, I think, 7 through 11 or whatever. I think there are a lot of those that can probably come out of here if we can adjust that way. Those CPSM, CGL recommendations, we don't need to do them if they don't accomplish what we want, which is lower crime rates. All right, so I take that for what it's worth, my thought, but I think we simplify this greatly and have some actionable measures. If we go back to, and I'm sorry, I forget who said it, but go back to where we were, set a year and say this is where we want to get back to.
Thank you, Councilor Rivers. Good idea. My only comment there would be that would need to be, if we were looking at actual raw data or numbers, have to be population adjusted or on some sort of a per capita basis, or maybe even comparison to peer cities would be another way of having a possible measurement. Councilmember Joy, and with everybody's permission, I'm going to call it a quits at the end of Councilmember Joy.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I heard some statistics. So people who own a ring have a higher perception of them being in an unsafe community. If the person has Ring and their phone is set to notification every time their Ring has a movement or whatever, their perception of safety is even worse than the person who just has a Ring. If we want to do perceptions, we're going to have to go up against multi-millionaire companies that are selling safety. Or maybe not selling safety, but selling unsafety, if there's such a word. Public perception is very easily manipulated. It's manipulated by marketing very easily. So just an idea. Thanks.
Okay, interesting. All right, Council, thank you very much. Staff, thank you for your work on what's very important. I encourage Council members to continue to look at these, dig into them, and offer specific wording suggestions by email to the whole Council and to staff. Chris, anything in the way of highlighting future agenda items?
No.
Any council discussion? Any public comment on anything not on our agenda? We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
We're sticking around.